On his 5th birthday, the boy suddenly collapsed. He was instantly overwhelmed by a nightmare. A man appeared before his eyes, beaten, bloody, kneeling and begging fate before the executioner, who held a sword raised high, preparing to strike. Behind them stood a row of women in uniform, emotionless, watching the horrific scene unfold. The executioner's gaze was cold and unyielding, while the doomed man trembled, his face turned into a mask of horror, drenched in blood, tears, and trembling. A quick, harsh jerk, the sword came down, and with one blow, severed the man's head from his shoulders, while the onlookers remained completely motionless. The boy lies in his bed and the nightmare takes his breath away, because reality just struck him with the realization. This was not just a bad dream. Before him unfolds the world of a game, familiar to him in every detail. And the villain who was just toppled in that scene was. He stared into the void. He froze exactly, sharply straightening up, tightly clutching his throat, and a wave of horror about what awaited him next washed over him. He literally remembered every detail of that game he once passionately loved. There unfolded a fantasy world about love and war, designed for adults. At the center of the story stood the main hero, known as the Sword Emperor. He was destined to become the strongest swordsman, but at this moment in the narrative, he was simply living calmly like an academician, enjoying his own life. The story focused on this hero. He fell in love and simultaneously trained with his comrades, and all of them grew stronger together, step by step. Their ultimate goal was to foil a conspiracy against the coup d'etat, which the evil duke was organizing along with his own family, and later to defeat them. The terrible truth finally settled in his mind. It was Luke Hagato Disgustos, the 5-year-old younger son of that very duke, and he remembered that in the game this character, Luke, had a truly dreadful nickname. The nickname Disgusting, Fat Toad, mocking his repulsive appearance and vile character. He recalled how the game Luke grew into a petty tyrant. Relying on his family's power, he tormented the protagonist and his allies. And the memory of the more mature episodes of that game, those he already could not cope with back then, made him shudder. He remembered the tragic story of the character whose life he now bore. Lucas told about that terrible character attributed to him. Supposedly, his mother died during childbirth, and then his own clan turned away and abandoned him. Having no natural magical talent, he developed a suffocating inferiority complex. Desperately trying to gain recognition by doing evil, he hoped for respect, but he was still used as a pawn for the Duke, after which he was eventually executed. In the big picture, he mattered very little. He could not even be called a serious obstacle. His only role in this story was to die. The realization struck him right in the gut, causing a fever of horror. Before his eyes grew a grotesque figure that he was doomed to become, and he understood this change would come in just 10 years, when both he and the protagonist would be doomed to turn 15. He tightly squeezes the pillow, a spark of stubbornness flares in his chest. He thinks, if he manages not to let himself turn into that monster that once crushed him from the inside, and does not commit any evil, then he can still reshape his own fate. He does not want to die. Relying on memories from his past life, he feels he no longer needs anyone's love from a family that will never give it. A short fairy tale about a quiet future flashed in his head. As a nobleman, he could live freely and without any worries, but the thought flashed by and immediately melted away. He sharply rejected this dream as soon as he realized exactly where the flaw was hidden in his plan. Suddenly, one decisive detail surfaced in his mind. He could no longer twist the fact that his family was evil. Punishment was already coming for them, and he would still fall under this purifying blow, regardless of what he did. To survive, he needed a power strong enough to protect himself. His gaze stopped on his own small hands. After all the defeats that had already pursued him before, he still remembered one important detail. Luca Disgustos had magical abilities. Focusing his attention to the edge, he felt a strange, transparently otherworldly energy flowing inside. It had to be mana. And now another question arose before him: how exactly to use it. In the game, the interface suggested everything, but here in reality, there was no such guy nearby who would guide him into it. He formed the thought maybe it was all just a play on words, similar to a chant. Concentrating on the intention, he pressed his palms to his chest and said, "Heal." A soft, shimmering glow enveloped his body in response. The light went out and he was left alone with the doubt whether the spell worked. There was no health bar to show the result, so he could not check. Yet still, as soon as he got up, he had to admit his condition had become a little better. He did not stop even at night. Again and again he cast the spell, pushing himself forward to hone the newly acquired skill. The conversation with the magic continued until his voice broke and disappeared into silence. He fell silent. The next morning, a quiet, gentle voice pierced his drowsiness. The maid was waking him and asking tenderly how he felt. He still felt the sluggishness that ran through his body, but at the same time he noticed his usual ailment had disappeared, and the answer flashed in his head. His mana was completely exhausted. That was why he had collapsed unconscious. From this he concluded, the reserves would last for only about 10 casts of this spell. While his maid touched his forehead and checked his condition, making sure he still felt unbearably bad, he realized independent exercises were not enough. To truly understand magic, he would have to study it thoroughly and preferably have a teacher nearby who would guide and direct him. He instantly rejected this idea. His father would definitely not agree to get a magical mentor for him. There was only one way out: self-study. He called his only trusted maid, a 12-year-old dog shapeshifter named Syrup, and asked her to bring a book. When she returned with a thick volume titled Magic Fundamentals, Syrup looked surprised and asked if he really wanted such a heavy textbook. He did not back down. He said he wanted to learn how to use magic. Then he sharply changed his manner and put on his face the most sincere, most pleading expression. "Well, please, Syrup," he asked. His display of vulnerability turned out to be unexpectedly effective. It hit the maid with such force that she was taken aback. Lying in her lap, he pressed his head to them and assured her that only she could truly be trusted by him. After that, he asked once again to teach him to read and count. Facing such straightforwardness from Garby, Syrup only noted, "It turns out he is still just a boy." Her surprise quickly melted away, giving way to determination. With a radiant, confident smile, she raised the book high and declared that he could rely on her. Her energy now spread boundlessly. Recalling the typical traits of dog people shapeshifters, she suggested taking the chance to also start physical training. And he took a comfortable position in her lap and briefly, without unnecessary words, refused. And even despite his disgust for exercises, lessons under Syrup began with his training. She immediately immersed herself in the text, her face focused as she absorbed the first lesson. She runs his lessons, tracing her finger over the pages of Magic Fundamentals, while he leaned back and laid his head on her lap. Luca could not hide his amazement. How is she able to handle such long and difficult words? She gently reassures him, assuring that he is fine. But as soon as she reaches the explanation of the difference between attributeless and attribute magic, her speech falters. She stammers, searching for the right words. While she hesitated, Lucas still grasped the main idea. He understood that soul-like glow in the air is mana, a transparent force whose volume and power depend on what a person is capable of from birth. This disproved his assumption. It turns out he really is gifted with magic. He returns in thought to how he once succeeded, and now understands. Heal worked only because he simply imagined his own mana, and the wound was gone. The basics opened without fog. A spell is born when you visualize the desired result in your mind and direct your mana so that it happens. Next, the text lays out two types of magic. Attributeless, the basic form that anyone can handle, and stronger attribute magic works only with the presence of a special innate talent, exactly the kind that, it is claimed, is lacking not only in commoners but in most nobles as well. When drowsiness pulls him into darkness, he involuntarily reels over his own roots in his mind. He is annoyed by the thought of that family, considered a true example of mastery, and he begins to wonder if the same ancestral heritage will one day allow him to gain the ability to control tribute magic. He is exhausted by the training. Eventually his strength breaks down, and he slowly sinks into sleep. Syrup gently lifts him and carries him to bed, placing the book Magic Fundamentals beside him. With a quiet smile, she slowly pulls the blanket over him, making sure he is comfortable. She stays beside him for a few seconds, and tenderness mixed with anxiety can be read in her gaze as she watches him sleep. Luke, now looking much older, stops and thoughtfully surveys his progress. Memories of the first days come to mind, when he literally collapsed unconscious every time he exerted himself. The mana exhausted him to the limit. But it was precisely because of this exhausting marathon that he realized, by completely burning out his reserves every day, one can increase the overall capacity that magical energy stored in the body. He learned to read on his own and immersed himself in study, greedily absorbing knowledge to escape the bleak future that awaited him. But still, he clenches with frustration. He never managed to find a proper magical mentor, and the staff in the annex, only the head butler and 3 maids, could give him only as much as they had. She remembered how his body was depicted in the game, covered with pimples, spots, warts, and cracked skin, all burdened further by excessive weight. There was no doubt the appearance could be better, and he decided that the first thing to do would be to take care of his own health. It all started with basic hygiene. He dipped his face in water and began washing, and when he soaped up, he was surprised to feel bubbles sticking right to his hands. This simple thing pushed him to a sharp, unexpected conclusion. In this world, people apparently are not used to washing daily, neither bathing nor even regular face washing. This new habit caught Syrup's attention. She watched him with interest and asked why the water was so foamy. Luke rose to explain and said he had sensitive skin and washed it very carefully. His answer clearly threw her off balance. She burst out screaming, not believing her eyes, and questioned how he could possibly have such delicate skin. He immediately understood. Without seeing the future he was trying to prevent, she wouldn't understand. So he simply brushed off her anxiety and cut in. For now, it is not a problem. Since then, the two of them established daily care twice a day, both following a strict routine. Syrup declared that, as his personal maid, she must master his routine and repeat it with him. Alongside him appeared another focused self-care. Now he even added this to bathing, turning it into a ritual and training it alongside magical exercises. In his dreams, he painted a future for himself where he would be rich enough to buy soaps, lotions, moisturizers, and high-end sunscreens without any fear that the price would hit his pocket. While he bathed, Syrup sat on the veranda and watched him, delighted that he was finally learning to take care of himself. She assured him, in a year his skin would become completely smooth, and if he continued in the same spirit, he would grow into a real handsome man. And Luke still had to get used to the very idea that he needed to wash his own body so thoroughly. His prophecy began to come true. His appearance noticeably improved. Syrup noticed that he looked much healthier, yet it was still felt. His mind was buzzing with many thoughts. He recalled an important change he had just made. He told his father that now he and Syrup would cook for themselves. He made this decision not by chance. Every time after eating dishes prepared for him by the staff, he felt extremely ill. That illness had to be repeatedly subdued with healing magic. The results of his new diet appeared instantly. He sat down to enjoy the meal he had prepared himself and felt that the food of this world simply did not suit his body. As soon as he started cooking for himself, his well-being improved, proving that there was nothing inherently, irreparably, wrong with his digestive system. Syrup also mentioned that from the late numbers of each morning he stopped sleeping. This became part of his new unchanging routine. Now he got up early, invariably went out into the forest near the annex to get some sun. He now even went for walks and stretched lightly, stretching his muscles, getting used to the new flexibility. Syrup crackled joyfully with delight. Finally, he can go outside. Later, while he relaxes in the bath, Syrup suggests the idea. Maybe he should start training. He immediately rejects this idea and explains to her that he cannot stand physical exercise, so there can be no talk of workouts. With a focused face, she asks if he wants a healthy, peaceful life without unnecessary burdens. He nods. That kind of life is his direct goal. Syrup presses on this spot and sharply asks how a light life can even exist if he only eats and sleeps. He warns that it won't last long because he will quickly become something terrible. Syrup agrees, admitting that such a lifestyle would indeed make maintaining a light life impossible. Relaxing alone in the water, she thinks about how sweet he is now, and she finds it hard to imagine how he came to be in such an exhausted state. She guesses that he could grow into a real handsome man. He continues the explanation and adds, an easy, relaxed life would leave him with a huge amount of free time. Sierra questions this and states that, as a nobleman, he has every right to rest. The other replies, continuous leisure quickly becomes a burden, Evan. If you go to entertainments or visit a casino every day, interest will not last long. His thoughts darken as soon as he gazes into his own reality. Although he was born of noble origin, he understands there is no safety net for him. Looking at how his father treated him, he is convinced that there is only one end. Sooner or later, he will be sacrificed or abandoned to his fate. He recalls himself in old age, the one who wasted privileged upbringing and brought himself to his own downfall. Now, he firmly decides to use what he has now and prepare in advance for the future. His plan relies on the advantages of a privileged childhood. He hopes to avoid any unnecessary difficulties. In the best case, he will find a wife who can support him thereafter. If this does not happen, he decides to find a source of income himself to live in abundance and without others' care. He examined the structure of the world. He found himself in a world split into two great arches. One step that could sharply change his path to stay away from Elisada's Royal Academy. After all, the character Luke was supposed to appear primarily in that part of the story. The first path is the War Arc, a grim story about how it was necessary to settle an incident ignited by the villain himself. The second is the Academy Arc, a lighter tale where the main focus is romance and training. He clearly realized, if he masters both, then he will gain the key to the future he so longed for. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead, as if trouble had already caught up with him. It seemed that if he stayed away from the academy, his chances of survival would increase many times, but he still went there because he had a very good reason to appear. The fault was theirs. The characters of this game. The montage of their faces and adventures filled his thoughts, and a soft, sincere smile appeared on his lips. He loved them. He froze, staring at the city spread out beyond the edge, and his determination grew firmer. In this world, he wanted to live exactly like Luke. He stubbornly decided to become a happy idler. Syrup briefly and clearly stated what she wanted, to live without unnecessary haste, in health and peace. But she declared that for this, he would have to master sword fighting. Luke, on the other hand, held on to the habit of moving as little as possible, although he noticed how passionately she herself was burning with the idea of blade exercises. She did not back down. She insisted that this was necessary not only for his protection, but could also bring real pleasure. He calmly explained he did not need to learn because as long as she was nearby, she would protect him. Syrup asked in surprise where he got the idea that she was training in fencing. He only replied dryly that he just felt that way. Her face was illuminated by a warm, broad smile. She gladly took responsibility and asked him to give her all the sword fights. One short word, "All right," and he agreed. When she left the yard at night, she saw him off with a wish of well-being. The next morning, despite refusing every portion of syrup offered to him for exercises, he still understood. Without training, one cannot call oneself completely healthy. So, rushing across the estate grounds, he was going to use a new spell he had just invented. He opened his arms and stretched them forward so that the palms faced each other, and magical energy was already gathering between them. "Come out," he shouted, and at the start of the spell began the incantation. Valet. He completes the spell and a smiling jelly-like creature appears. He gave it the name Val, creating it with his own primordial magic without any attributes or origin. He put a specific purpose into the spell. It works even when he is asleep. To understand how Val works, one must first grasp the basics of attributive magic. It is this magic, without any attachments, that converts mana into other forms, and it is usually divided into 5 main categories. He focuses on the first 2 types. Household magic covers everyday practical needs from creating light to cleaning, and spells, in his opinion, rely on wide application. The world is rarely bathed. Next comes power magic. It draws mana to temporarily enhance physical parameters. Its result is directly tied to the user's condition. Noticeable strength comes at the cost of endurance exhaustion. The third category is enchantment magic, a specialized school of magic that imbues weapons with additional properties. It is a type of boost magic primarily used by blacksmiths and enchanters, and it admits that it has no idea how to perform it. Next, he reflects on the supportive and magical branches. They strengthen or weaken others by enveloping them with mana. The power of these spells depends on how vividly the summoner imagines them. The last category is restorative magic. It precisely puts the body in order so that it heals. He maintains a confident tone in this area thanks to the medical education he received in his past life. Summarizing the review, he emphasizes, all these schools of magic are based on a common core principle: the transformation of mana. It is this principle that he applied to compose the Oath, a unique self-sufficient spell. Checking his own work in action, he marvels at how easily it can be controlled. He just has to give the command, "Val, bring me that water," and the creature immediately rises above the ground and collects the liquid. Laying his forehead on the table, he entrusts everything to the hands of his new creature. His true plan for Vila is revealed as soon as he sleeps soundly at his desk. He ordered the structure to envelop his body. During restand, the creature executed the order flawlessly. He devised a flawless plan to set the body in motion without expending his own effort. As soon as his magically created creature relentlessly drove his limbs through exhausting training work, he remained mentally detached, coldly observing everything and deriving grim satisfaction from the process. His logic was simple: if he could train while unconscious, everything would turn out to be a trifle. Next to the jelly-like creature, Val confirmed that this was exactly the solution he had seen. The ability of the creature to move independently became an incredible gift. Now he could train without giving up his favorite, carefree rhythm of life. When his automated training ended, he leaned back on the sofa and froze for a moment with a thoughtful look on his face. He lay among piles of books and admitted, although everything was going as well as possible, many tasks still awaited ahead. At the same time, he was already preparing for the fact that tomorrow the body would inevitably respond with muscle pain. A sudden spasm of hunger interrupted his thoughts. It was still only afternoon, but the training had already drained his strength. Besides, he was still a boy who was growing. Suddenly, Syrup appeared with dessert. Luke reasoned, excessive moderation also brings no good. After all, he was moving towards the dream of a lazy, cunning nobleman's life. Satisfied, squinting, he dipped into the sweets. 5 years passed. In a huge library, 11-year-old Luke sits in silence, immersed in a book, while 17-year-old Sapor stands nearby watching intently and attentively. He approaches him, making a sly smile, and calls his name to get him to look. Without taking his eyes off the reading, he calmly asks again what she wants. The large chair beneath him lifts him into the air and rises from the floor. It hangs right in the sky. Syrup freezes in place, stunned, staring and demanding an answer on how he stays in flight. Luke mentally draws a parallel. Carrying oneself is the same as carrying a glass, but he decides explaining to Syrup would be a hassle because she doesn't get along with magic. She looks away from the question and instead asks if she wants a ride. Her shock passes curiosity remains, and she hesitantly asks if she can. He nods, of course she can. She nervously approaches the chair hanging in the air. He tells her not to be afraid and explains that he uses his mana to keep the chair steady and correct. After the reassuring words, she nods in agreement. When she sits down, her face lights up with an expression of embarrassed delight from that unique and wonderfully comfortable sensation. She exclaims that she has never felt anything so comfortable before and that pleases him. Gathering her thoughts, she raises her hand to ask another question. He allows it, and she asks how his body is so well trained, since she had only seen him reading, sleeping, or walking. He agrees. Her misunderstanding is quite natural, considering what she had noticed. Answering, he stands before her and begins to explain. First, he gathers mana together, then compresses it. To demonstrate, he squeezes the energy in his palm and forms a complex, glowing orb in his hand. Watch closely, he says, while Syrup silently watches, her gaze igniting with concentration, eyes wide open. A powerful aura bursts from his body. It turns out that over the last 5 years, his VL has significantly evolved and, along with it, his understanding of this power has grown. After this, he showed another facet of his training. In the spacious yard, he made his way through a series of fast, precise combat forms, while Syrup watched attentively from the doorway. His body turned into continuous motion, a high kick immediately followed by a powerful block, after which came a sharp punch. The skill of the martial, demonstrated in flawless sequence, completely stunned Syrup. She froze, eyes wide open with admiration. Instead of accepting what she saw, she was frozen in amazement and tried to understand what exactly was happening before her. She recalled how he constantly insisted that he hated exhausting training. Despite her confusion, she did not look away while he finished his exercise, then stopped the last, decisive, accentuated strike. Concentration froze on his face, compressing the space around him. He exhaled quietly, and from the tension, a faint blush appeared on his cheeks. Immediately he praised his work, calling it incredible. Turning to face her, he asked for her honest opinion. Syrup ignited the conversation and gave free rein to her surprise. He was probably pushing himself to the limit. She said his movements were at a master level, one she had never seen anywhere, even from famous, experienced fighters. Then he revealed the secret of his mastery, a new spell he invented himself, Trace. He explained that Trace allows him to absorb VL into his own body and transmit her memories directly to his brain. This skill, he added, allows VL to flawlessly reproduce the movements of her favorite martial arts masters. Even if he himself no longer remembers the exact details, VL can retrieve them and even mix in techniques from his favorite fighting games and manga. So he gathered all the knowledge he absorbed, every fighting style, its history, and through fusion and synthesis formed his own unique martial art. He explains to Syrup, although his soaring spell looks impressive, he has already invented another. He trained his body long and hard, building strength and honing muscle memory, even when he does not fully realize his own movements. Syrup freezes in place and looks at him intently. Her eyes widen in shock, and she declares that he is a genius, but he quietly denies it. She continues to watch his progress enchanted, thinking to herself, her 11-year-old master has already managed to touch the mysterious abyss of magic with the corner of his eye. When Luke admits that he does not understand what she is talking about, Syrup only smiles and explains. It means that he had to try very hard to comprehend it. A little later, standing on the balcony, Lucas says he is tired after training and asks if Syrup wants him to prepare a change of clothes. Inside, he thinks, his advanced knowledge came to him from a past life, yet he still does not fully understand how exactly it works. His exhaustion leads them to a spring deep in the forest. He declares that he wants to quickly immerse himself in the bath, and the girl with the basket for Syrup agrees to keep him company. In the cold water, Luke suddenly realizes this is their closest bathing spot to the shore. While silence stretches around, his thoughts drift into Syrup. He recalls how other maidservants whispered that she has recently become incredibly beautiful. He plunges into memories of how he himself built a beauty regimen for her and set fencing training over the past 5 years, and concludes, her fierce stubbornness has been polished, and her beauty has risen to a completely different level. After that, he calls her by name, and her instant, passionate reaction makes him realize, seeing the sweet, devoted side in her is his personal, exceptional privilege. Having caught his breath after the rest, they go back inside. Luke is already wearing a hooded robe, and he gives Syrup the task to tell his father that he wants his magical attribute to be determined. Syrup immediately agrees without any hesitation. He receives the request and leans back into a soft armchair, staring straight ahead, while Syrup dazes in the folds and disappears completely. When she leaves, his mind immerses itself in the foundations of this reality and the power that rules it. What is called oath magic, an innate ability one is born with here, is called the power defined by God. He pondered how innate magic is determined for each person. It seemed everything boiled down to something simple. You are told what attribute you have. Yet he still could not understand who exactly would take on the task of telling him this and naming his specifically. The Ministry of Magic of Alecidus is responsible for these duties, an institution that manages all attribute spells of the kingdom, and is supported only by the most powerful wizards in the world. In his room, he exhaled and sank into calm, feeling confident. Someone from that elite circle would definitely visit and inform him about his attribute, a privilege granted by noble origin. He knew there were people born without attributes, but he did not think he should worry about that. After all, the Disgusto family always had incredibly strong qualities. He recalled his father's sand, his older brother's iron, his older sister's temptation, and even his stepmother's stone. Behind such a mighty lineage, he was restless about the question of what his own ability would be. A premonition hung in the air, thick and palpable. He could no longer contain his impatience. The next day he rushed out of the room on the go, riding on a floating cushion, but he was stopped by a stranger who had been standing just behind the door all this time. The Mana highly respected official with a sharp gaze and a dark coat made a remark about the pretty girl who was riding on the cushion. Luca was taken aback by shock. The man's words sounded like a confident assumption. He really tried to look proper, yet still could not understand whether his appearance was truly so charming that he could be mistaken for a girl. While Syrup swallowed the words he heard, he stepped forward to give the name and introduce the person. Before them stood Malsa Glyco, head of the Attributive Bureau of the Ministry of Magic. The gaze of the syrup leader slid onto the figure on the pillow. He froze, adjusted his glasses, and it was as if a silent light dawned on him. He finally understood everything. He stopped in front of Luca, who was sitting upright on the cushion, and next to him a bottle of syrup was waiting. Only then did the official speak, addressing him incorrectly as young lady. He praised the maid for her impressive memory, unable to miss how quickly she remembered his full title, having heard it only once. As he pondered, he had the impression that such perfection was the norm for a servant in his respectable household, where even the smallest details were treated with meticulous disgust. After his words of praise, he fixed his gaze on the haze hiding behind her shoulder and asked where he could find the young master who spoke about that family. Syrup answered without unnecessary words, "That's quite natural," and pointed with her hand to the boy sitting on the large armchair bed. The boy Luca froze in place and watched the conversation, not understanding why the official had just praised the maid so warmly. While the official was confused, Syrup noticed his bewilderment and flawlessly, in an official tone, introduced, "This is Luca Gugolo Disgusto-sama." Malso Glico stopped and ran through his own surprise in his head. He expected that instead of Syrup, he would be met with an attack, that the beastman would be chased, so he was already prepared to intervene. The reason was how the state church hammered its rules. It insists that civilians must rule and that all without exception non-humans, beast people, half-people, spirits, and demons must be branded. Luke, having read the man's character, concluded that he was not so bad after all. He approached closer and greeted him familiarly, calling him Malson. The official involuntarily shuddered at such a tone, after which he clarified, "His name is Malsaglico." Then he extended his hand for a handshake and asked to be called simply Luke. Melsa looked down at the small palm offered to him, and his face softened. The official accepted the gesture, firmly shook the boy's hand, and responded in kind. After all the ceremonies, Malsa declared that it was time to check Luca's magical attribute. He ordered the boy to close his eyes. Luca immediately obeyed, and Malsa took a steady breath, a faint unease flashing across his face for a moment. He took out a small pointed instrument. It immediately lit up. Holding it forward, he focused and was ready to begin the assessment. The result worked instantly and became obvious. Luca possessed sleep and careless negligence. He recalls the moment when Mulsiglico pronounced the names of his attributes. At that very moment, he feels these traits sprouting within him, as if they had always been there, only now confirmed, not revealed for the first time. A wave of delight washes over him, and he whispers, "Incredible." Malsaglico offers to explain everything once again, but Luca interrupts the conversation. He suddenly realizes what kind of magic he can use. He just needed to listen to the names of those attributes. The official representative continues and clarifies, among all types of attribute magic, there are exceptional ones, rare magic. He confirms that both of Luca's attributes, sleep and laziness, belong precisely to this category. He explains, although most abilities are recorded in an open registry, keeping rare magic secret is a common practice. Then he suggests officially registering Luca's powers under a vague formula of magic that affects the human body, and Lucas agrees. Luke admits that only simple ways to use his powers come to mind and asks if there are other options for application. Melso replies, "Everyone has spells that suit them best, and growth comes when you explore your own abilities." He raises a finger, emphasizing, "Only the search for magic that suits you leads to true mastery." Luke calmly considers the man's words. The boy vows to take this advice into account when he begins training, but Malsa looks extremely surprised by such a response. The official surprise instantly cracks and turns into shock. He demands an explanation of how Luke could have known about the magic of evaluation at all, about the very concept the boy just claimed to have no idea about. Luke calmly mirrors his words, clarifies whether the assessment of his traits is not the same as what Malsa just did. After that, he names where this knowledge came from. As a reincarnator, he simply assumed that such a thing exists at all and did not know that it must be kept secret. Calmly gives the order to Sirop, serve tea to the guests, as if completely ignoring Malsa Glikos's embarrassed reaction, then falters, stammers, unable to find words after the recent revelation. While Sirop pours the drink, Malsa takes a sip and his composure slowly returns. He closes his eyes and says the tea is incredibly tasty. He asks what his name is, and Luca explains. It is a personally recommended herbal tea that has a good effect on the body. Sirop adds that she grew it herself, so now it cannot be bought. Malsa notes, the tea has already clearly cleared his head. Smiling, he thanks Lukavi for understanding and offers to treat him to a handful of tea leaves. Then he seeks confirmation, believing that he should keep everything related to appraisal magic a secret. He says that his own daughter about Luca's Agidor's magic, so she definitely liked the tea. Luca freezes in amazement when he learns that Malsa has a daughter. The mention of magic sharply shifts his attention. Mal Selena leans forward and looks her in the eyes intently, asking about the flying cushion that Luke used earlier. He says without hesitation that it was not a simple illusion. Luke barely smiles and with one motion cuts off the questioning as if to say, everything is fine. Seeing how sharply he reacted, Malso apologizes for his outburst. Luke holds a small jelly-like creature in syrup, raises his hand and gestures Mal closer, inviting them to talk. When the sun sets over the distant mountains, their long conversation cuts into silence and ends. When Malsa is about to leave, he thanks Lucas for the time spent, but Luca abruptly stops him with a strange question, whether Malsa agrees to become his mentor. At the request, he raises his hand and covers his mouth. Malsa Gliko freezes for a moment, confused. He notices that the boy actually doesn't need a magical mentor and states he himself doesn't think Luca needs it. After that, he directly asks what exactly the boy hopes to learn. He clarifies his modest proposal. He needs Malsa to respond to all the letters he sends, inquiring about magic that he does not understand. Overall, he simply asks him to become a correspondent. The man's face clears up, a smile flashes on his lips. You catch yourself thinking that the idea is really interesting. Agreeing, the boy impatiently begs for confirmation. Does this mean yes? Malsa immediately puts forward his condition. Asks if Luca would mind if he occasionally asks him a few questions as well. He nods without hesitation, yet admits with slight modesty he is not sure he can answer even one of these questions. After that, Malsa smiles and solemnly declares that it is agreed. When all the agreements suddenly settled, they exchanged sincere, radiant smiles. Luke expressed words of gratitude from the bottom of his heart, and Malsa confirmed that she would gladly write together with him. After these words, their correspondence began. A little later, Luki settled more comfortably and read the letter, lost in thought. How he managed to get a mentor in Malsani, and thanks to this became quite knowledgeable in match. When he immersed himself in his own research, he realized one crucial difference. Unlike prescriptionless magic, where mana can be freely transformed by the power of imagination, spells with prescriptions must adhere to certain rules depending on their own attribute. It was evaluative magic that allowed him to recognize and understand his innate magic. He learned that innate magic is the name of the basic spells of a certain attribute. For the fire attribute, for example, these include Pilot Flame, Fireball, and Fire Arrow. Everything beyond these basics entirely depends on what the user themselves knows and has practiced. He wanders his eyes around and focuses on his own attribute Sleep, because it contains 3 innate magical spells. The first is simply Sleep. It can put the target to sleep. Its effect can be adjusted by changing the intensity depending on how much mana he pours in and the resistance of the target itself. He continued analyzing the arguments and extracted the last 2 innate spells from his attribute. The second was supposed to be Sleep Timer, a spell that sets the duration of sleep through touch so that the target does not wake up during the specified time. no matter what happens next. And the third, as he believed, would be sleep delete, the ability to dispel any sleep magic by force. With these abilities, he clearly realized for the first time, people can be put to sleep even before they understand what is happening. And if he combined everything with his laziness ability, his victims would lose their bearings and remain completely in the dark. But he immediately felt there was a catch. Magic can be restrained thanks to innate resilience and protective spells. This prohibition suddenly gave him an idea. If the owner of the fire ability can assemble a tool in the form of a fire arrow, then perhaps he can also make an arrow for sleep to put people to sleep from a distance. The very thought made a confident smile appear on his face. Both of his abilities seemed too incredibly as if he was bypassing the rules. He glanced at the open book, and the letter from the new mentor thoughts raced as if a whole set of chances was unfolding in his mind. He could put the teacher to sleep and disrupt the lesson whenever he wished. There were no limits, had many spells he wanted to try. Even a whole lifetime would not be enough to test them all. Luke thought of it as a newly cultivated habit. Every morning, he surrenders control of his body to vowel singing. He notices, this very practice clears his mind and allows him to more focusedly engage in magical experiments. Regimen Saruma approaches closer and asks if he wants to eat. He eagerly accepts her offer. He demonstrates how flawless everything looks in their arrangement. Although the syrup is perfect in every way except for the details, he still prefers to cook for himself based on memories of dishes from a past life. They take turns cooking food. After all, it's simple. Her food turns out completely edible, but it completely lacks attention to the smallest details. Luca is already 11, and he decides to wash off the sweat after training while she cooks in the kitchen. With each passing year, he increasingly feels how his anxieties grow, but he pushes them aside, let them wait for their time. He heads to the nearest water source, a hidden natural spring. Just as he begins to bathe, a faint murmur of voices breaks through to his ears. Her voice drowns in despair. The young girl chokes on tears and insists that she is about to die alone. He stares in confusion because this secluded place is almost never visited by any man. He listens to the noise of the surrounding thickets and notices where the sound is coming from, looks around the area. It does not seem too dangerous and wonders if a child is lost. "Who are you?" he calls out loud. His voice bursts out suddenly, flinches, and lets out a quiet, embarrassed "oh." When he takes a step closer, he realizes she is not alone here. Suddenly, the clearing fills with a strange, intrusive, repetitive sound. The girl freezes, staring at Luca, who is seen half undressed. His cheeks are burning and his hands tremble, pressing his palms to his mouth in shock. Luca himself just looks back calmly and without any emotion, as if it doesn't amuse him at all. For that girl to become a guest at one of his sisterly tea parties, he actually forgot about this event surprisingly quickly. Meanwhile, the girl herself was confused. Her eyes darted around, and she, stunned, choked on words and babbled incessantly from shock. It looked like genuine panic. He introduced himself with a smile just as Luke Hugelo had described it. The girl let out a quiet, piercing squeak, and in a moment her face lit up with recognition. She asked if he was the younger brother of her respected Iris. After that, although somewhat awkwardly, she officially introduced herself. Karen C. Caribbean, the 12-year-old daughter of Count Caribbean. Luke watched her with a gentle smile. Her sincere effort amused him, and when he spoke, he addressed her simply familiarly as Karen and said. Her reserve vanished instantly, and her eyes opened wide with eager curiosity. She crouched opposite him and asked if he could use gift magic. As she spoke, her face glowed with pure admiration. He confirmed that he could, and added that he sincerely loved magic, then extended his hand and pulled her up. Then he turned the question to her, asking if she would show him her own attribute magic. Her answer burst out immediately, sharp and full of zeal. "Yes, right now, sir," she declared. The professional enthusiasm in her voice made him wonder if she worked in some shop. Politely saying, "Excuse me," she continued speaking. A flash and a small, oddly decorated pouch appeared in her hands. Opening it, she took out a whole unexpected assortment of kitchen utensils and added that her magic was limited to this pouch, and all the items could be easily bought anywhere. He was quite intrigued by her magical bag. It looked as if it could hold far too much. He immediately spoke about wanting to see how she used her spells, then gently hinted, maybe she should get dressed first. Responding, she began cooking. At the forest edge, the boiling of oil rumbled as she skillfully wielded a frying pan and stirred a large pot. Her magic specialty was precisely related to the kitchen. A moment later, she served him a hot bowl of spicy soup with honeymoon rabbit, from which steam rose. She said it was just a dish she cooked from everything she had on hand, and kindly invited him to taste it. He was gnawed by the question, why does food prepared with gift magic turn out so unique? As soon as he raised the spoon to his lips, a pleasant aroma burst into his nostrils and filled all his senses. When the soup touched his tongue, he immediately felt an explosion of flavor. A wave filled his entire being and knocked him off his feet. The dish was incredibly delicious, far better than anything he had ever tasted even in his past life. From this pleasure strike, he felt for a moment as if he was rising up and literally being pulled out of his seat. Suddenly a power flared inside him, like a wave rising from the depths. The food immediately gave him a tangible status, a solid buff. He sharply glanced down and saw in surprise. The bowl was already empty. The realization hit him like an electric shock. Before him was a young noblewoman who knows how to cook dishes that enhance abilities. His gaze fixed on Karen with renewed strength. At that moment, he made a decision. She was the best support for the lazy life he intended to lead. He would not let her slip away. He called her name and she responded. He leaned forward and his face became completely focused. He asked her if she would cook this soup for him every day as soon as they grew up. Karen quickly met his gaze. Her eyes widened in surprise. Without hesitation, he raised his hand to his chest and immediately declared his intentions. He proposed and offered to marry, assuring that he would gladly join her family. The proposal literally threw Karen off balance. Her cheeks flushed red. Luke spoke without unnecessary complications, nothing simpler. The most important thing for him was her incredible cooking, and he firmly believed that Karen would continue to feed him, even if his own disgusting family was eventually crushed. She could only choke up and ask a question to confirm that he had just proposed to her. For Luca, this day became a truly wonderful encounter. That amazing meeting set off a chain of events. Luca immediately called his father to formalize everything officially, but the Duke, showing no interest, just waved it off and ordered to do as he saw fit. Then everything moved quickly. Soon the families agreed on a meeting. Luca and Syrup arrived at the place where they were met by Count Caribbean, Karen's father, who warmly invited them to his restaurant. Inside the restaurant, the Count gestured for him to sit. Luke apologized for his father's absence. The Count waved his hand dismissively, as if to say he knew. The Duke had just appeared briefly and then left immediately. But deep down, he could not shake his disbelief. The head of a noble house had not come to his own son's marriage meeting. He listened attentively while the boy spoke, and seemed not at all worried about the absence of his father. Luke calmly and directly stated that he did not care, as if Duke had never come, and Karen wondered if that masculine, intimidating presence might have been too strong for her. Then he indicated his intentions without any hints, addressing the Count directly. As the second son, he explained that he could devote himself to service and officially asked if it would be acceptable for him to marry into the Carib family. The Count's face blossomed with a broad, sincere smile of joy. He immediately accepted the proposal with enthusiasm, stating that the Caribbean family would gladly welcome Luca. The loud agreement almost knocked the ground out from under Karen's feet. She sharply looked at Luke, and her face froze in complete disbelief. She asked if he really didn't mind someone like her. But Luke didn't have time to answer. Her father cheerfully interrupted, saying that Karen had already confessed her love to the boy. She blushed with shame a moment later. He remembered hearing she was the first to confess, but another worry gripped his thoughts. He said he was tormented by rumors that other girls mocked Karen because of her appearance. He already knew without a doubt who was behind it. The name of a girl named Iris surfaced in his mind. She was only 12, and everyone knew. She mocked everyone she didn't consider one of her own, but treated the beauty she favored differently. He clenched his teeth, immediately realizing that the talk was exactly about his sister. He examined Karen's appearance even more carefully. He admitted to himself she was a bit plump but still young, just gaining shape. More than that, her round face seemed cute to him. He believed Karen was a good person, but honestly admitted what attracted him most were her culinary skills and her status. Hearing this, the Count sincerely thanked that a guy like Luke noticed Karen's inner beauty, and Luke silently corrected. He saw it differently. After that, the story shifted toward his family history. He explained that the Caribs grew from fishermen and traders, and now run a whole range of businesses at sea. Noticing that Luke had fair skin, he spoke anxiously, saying that everyone in their family, including himself, regularly went to sea, but Luke looked too frail for the sun. Karen laid out clearly what place she held in the family. Since she had no brothers, the house would pass to her. And she even smiled like the sun. If a younger brother appeared later, she would without hesitation give him that place, and relying on her culinary skills, would gladly open her own restaurant. Returning to the Count's earlier worry about the son, Luke confidently reassured him. He explained that he had trained and was much stronger than he appeared. Then he declared that his sun protection was flawless and revealed his secret weapon, sunscreen. He thought if he called Val, seasickness would bypass him, and the luggage would be carried instead of him, and he could just fall asleep. He told himself decided, and felt it was time to stop burdening the family. As soon as Count Castilian managed to get ready to apologize, Perez's voice broke the pause. He spoke about trust in his daughter and handed her over to Luke, ordering the two of them to have a proper time together. Luke agreed without hesitation and thanked his future father-in-law. The Count laughed loudly at the very name, waved his hand as he walked away, and remarked that the boy was in too much of a hurry. As soon as her father left, Karen sharply turned to Luke and fixed him with a gaze. She faltered on his name, then blurted out that she wanted to become such a beauty as to stand next to him, and Luke had to freeze for a moment. He remembered how he accidentally overheard. From a very young age, she worried about her appearance. He told her she was already quite pretty, but she immediately and passionately denied it, saying he meant something other than what she wanted to say. She explained that she wanted to grow truly beautiful, and her thoughts immediately drifted to Iris, who seemed to always look down on her. Luke offered to help, immediately warning he was a strict teacher. When everything was ready, Karen accepted. Eva's confidence wavered when she asked if a person like her could even become beautiful. But he, without hesitation, met her with a confident smile and assured her, "She can, and there is one extraordinarily easy way." In Trigger, he caught the thought for a second, to use sleep, ability, and his vow to push her towards a diet, but immediately realized losing weight was not her main goal. It turned out that this place and time were completely unsuitable. He suggested they go somewhere else. Karen agreed, then asked if they could address each other by first names only, and he immediately agreed. Then he called Syrup and ordered her to check if no one was spying on them. When confidentiality was ensured, he told Karen the conversation would continue in his room. To the embarrassed Karen, he explained that his method of nutrition is based on magic, then admitted, maybe he exaggerates, but after what he overheard, he is genuinely concerned about her older sister, so he speaks directly, without unnecessary detours. He explained, in a simple sense, it is a way to train while you sleep. Karen reacted with incomprehension. It was hard for her to grasp the idea itself. He revealed that his attributes are sleep and laziness, and this stunned her. After that, he confirmed he would apply the sleep attribute to control her diet. He continued and explained, everything happens very simply. He combines his magic without signs, then calls Val, the slug. Next, he plans to apply a sleep spell to her so that Val jumps into her body and starts performing a clear series of movements that her body will immediately repeat. When Karen looks at the little slug, her face softens. He seems incredibly cute to her. She unmistakably concludes that Val must work as a self-sufficient spell. He confirms her guess and agrees to demonstrate the whole process on himself. Val envelops his hand. After that, he orders Val to do light exercises and sets the sleep timer exactly for 1 minute. After a minute, he opens his eyes. Karen is clearly stunned. Her hands tremble near her mouth. She covers her shock with her palms, then exclaims that his movements were incredible, real, like those of a martial arts fighter. Wiping a drop of sweat from his forehead, he cannot believe the strange sensation. He trained but does not remember the effort at all. He reassures Karen and says she just needs to let Val inside, after which she asks if she can really do it too. He asked if she was skilled in training, but Karen honestly admitted she was not successful at it. While Syrup helped her change into more appropriate clothes, Lucas suggested trying it in practice, and Karen readily agreed immediately. Entering the prepared workout clothes, she agrees to a light warm-up to get her body used to it, raises her shoulder and shows off her bicep, then proudly declares that despite her lack of exercise skills, she has considerable strength. Lucas silently notices this discrepancy. The effect comes instantly and knocks you off your feet. Karen collapses weakly on the leather-covered couch, drenched in sweat, gasping for air and trying to understand if this was really an easy exercise. Luke stands over her composed and asks how she feels, but Karen can only manage a weak, broken sound. She moaned quietly, and her whole body ached so much it seemed impossible to move. Luke supported her and began explaining that they would start with simple exercises to gradually build endurance, suggesting to use healing magic, but immediately warning that muscle pain would still remain afterward. Despite the pain, she clenched herself with determination and agreed, promising to do everything she could. Lucas smiled, encouraging her not to give up. After that, he moved on to his beauty routine and instructed her to lather the soap into a thick foam. He explained that the foam would pull out the dirt, so there would be no need to scrub harshly, and the skin would be protected. Karen absorbed what she heard and grasped the meaning of his words. She obediently followed his instructions, carefully rubbed in the foam. The next step, as he explained, was to rinse the foam off her face well and always make sure that when it touched her skin, nothing scratched or irritated it. With a clean face, she found time for makeup. Karen froze before the whole collection of bottles, and her eyes widened with pure curiosity. Lucas immediately noticed how quickly she picked everything up and how passionately she burned with enthusiasm she was turning out to be a grateful student. The last link in his plan he called nutrition. During his lecture he emphasized, without the necessary nutrients it is impossible to build a good body. Karen, already dressed, listened to the lesson with interest and praised his culinary skill. Confident that with the right ingredients he could cook tasty diet food, he moved on. With inspiration, she started with simple recipes dishes with soy and salad with freshly steamed chicken. After that, Karen was completely hooked. She irresistibly wanted to invent new healthy dishes. She instantly grasped all his basic ideas and transformed them into an impressive selection of unique dishes. A real mountain of dishes grew on the table. He was overwhelmed. Lucas said, "You cooked too much." But secretly he was glad for the chance to try Japanese cuisine in this new world: natto hamburgers and miso soup. She lowered her gaze and froze in indecision. Karen admitted, even healthy food, eaten in excess, is harmful, but she couldn't throw it away. She really wanted to finally try so many different dishes. Luke Kumlai suggested a solution: to give the leftovers to one of the nearby orphanages. She shines with inspiration and declares that the idea is flawless. Simultaneously, she can explore cooking, and everything they themselves cannot eat is given to orphanages. Instead of postponing, her plan is already set in motion. She cooks more and more dishes every day and delivers them in turn to various orphan shelters. Luke watches this. In his mind, he sees only benefits on both sides. In the carriage during the ride, he asks if she will go again today. She nods and admits, even though he planted the idea, she still much prefers to just lounge at home. She continues, and another reason for her refusal emerges. The shelters are extremely unsanitary. This becomes especially obvious at the moment when she shudders from a rat rustling under the floorboards. Everywhere there is a miserable, dirty, decayed children huddle near filthy cages. To the children, many of them uncombed, huddled together, came up to her and called her name. She bitterly realizes, even pure magic cannot fix the entire building at once. And worse than that, some of the orphans are completely unable to use magic to tidy themselves up. She tells Lucas, the church controls the orphanage, and priests appear only when money is involved. That is why she cannot use her healing magic without limits. Her explanation is interrupted by a frantic rush. A young girl bursts in, gasping for breath, and pleadingly stretches out her hands, begging to save her younger brother. He fell and is no longer waking up. Her disgust for the church confuses her. She fusses and hesitates. Noticing this, Luke gently touches her cheek with his palm, calming her. Nothing can be done, and he himself will go check on the boy. He notices the boy lying in bed. Breathing is rapid and heavy, as if there is not enough strength to inhale. Luke quickly engages in assessing the condition. Pneumonia suspicion immediately arises in his mind. While he examines the half-ruined room from all sides, his gaze fixes on the main point. There are no conditions here for the sick to properly recover. Leaning over the child, he places his hand on the chest and clenches his will inside. He imagines the boy breathing evenly again and utters a single word: heal. Soft light flows from his palm, and in a moment, the ragged, tense breaths begin to ease. Quietly, almost shyly, the boy's sister asks how much the treatment will cost. Luke answers briefly and dryly, nothing. When the now-healed boy gets up and sits down, the sister suddenly breaks into tears, endlessly thanking Luke for his kindness. Luke turns away, and no emotion or thought can be read on his face. He calmly explains that he was just practicing his magic, and as the Duke's son, he assures that he does not need money. His words confuse Karen. She tells him there was no need to reveal his status, but at the same time sincerely thanks him, and only now does she realize exactly how the same illness can be cured. While she sincerely and continuously thanks him, Luke shifts his gaze to Syrup and calls her by name. He quietly, without unnecessary words, observes everything and notes, Karen is smart. Then he thinks aloud that her life would be much easier if the environment around her improved. Picking up the silent intentions of her master, Syrup stands before the orphanage director. With a confident smile, she suggests, if the Duke has more money than he can manage, it is logical to put some of it to use. The director pauses for a moment and hesitates, but Lucas steps forward, cutting off the very need to consult. He declares that refusal is not an option and places a heavy bag with 50 gold coins on the table, ordering the stunt coordinator to use it, improve hygiene, and start teaching the children. He runs through the recent events in his mind and suddenly clearly realizes orphanages have become a real testing ground for his healing magic. Here he can hone his skills on everything from poisons and diseases to wounds left by monsters. And he admits to himself, once he was just drifting with the flow without a clear goal, but now circumstances truly affect him and are genuinely interesting. Now that he has turned 14, Lucas looks back on the last 3 years since his engagement to Karen. His life has settled into a calm, familiar rhythm. Sirop, the maid, takes care of almost all his small tasks, and Karen cooks for him every day. He consistently maintains his health and appearance with the help of Val's Slimend, feels that his perfect, lazy routine only grows stronger and better. He also admits, thanks to Karen, he has discovered many new and completely different sensations. But suddenly, a suffocating realization overwhelms him. These quiet days are already on the home stretch. Such a rapid change is brewing because Karen is to enter the academy in spring, which means living in a dormitory. Therefore, he decides to make use of every minute of the time they still have together. Keeping this in mind, he noticed that Karen was late for their meeting. Deciding that he knew exactly where to look for her, he set out to find her himself. Making his way through the main building, Lucas notices something strange. His older brother, Testa Huguelot de Custos, is standing here at this time. Testa passes by without saying a word, as if his brother does not exist at all. Lucas mentally notes, although he has already grown taller than his brother, Testa shows no interest in this. He rejects the very meeting, deciding to throw his brother out of his mind and focus only on searching for Karen. He cannot shake the feeling. He knows exactly where she will be. The search leads him to the garden there. He sees a woman sitting elegantly on a chair amid the blossoms. From afar, he closely watches her and notes, her diet has brought incredible results. Now she is widely recognized as a true beauty, praised both for her appearance and her femininity. His delight is cut off by a familiar voice calling his name. He turns sharply and sees his older sister Iris, who is sitting at the neighboring table. She smiles and asks what brought him here. Before he can answer, she glances toward Karen and inquires whether he intends to borrow her or if he came to ruin their tea party. Luke almost swore when he realized. Karen came to his sister Iris Huguelot Disgustos. He stands before the table and firmly declares that he came to take back his kidnapped bride. His sister, Iris, shoots him a glare like a screech. Her face darkens from this disruption. Her power works quietly and imperceptibly. As soon as a man meets her gaze, he usually falls under her spell, turning into a helpless toy. This time nothing works. Karen tries to apologize to Luke and, looking intently at him, notices he seems completely unaffected. Luke nods, and this only intensifies Iris's silent irritation. He reassures Karen and assures her that she has nothing to apologize for, then shifts his gaze to his sister and asks if her little game is over. He presses his arguments, stating that it is unfair when Iris takes all of Karen's time for herself. Understanding that he still has a year before the academy, he wants to be with her until that moment. Iris brushes off his request. She tells him to leave them alone because at the academy, when they are there together, she will have plenty of time to talk with Karen. While tension flares between the brother and sister, Karen becomes confused but feels a pleasant thrill in the silence. The thought of two handsome people competing for her attention excites her. Nearby, Iris snorts in frustration. Her plan clearly did not go as she expected. Having no choice, Luke bows low, a gesture of restrained, formal apology. He tells his sister that such a terrifying expression spoils her beautiful face. After that, he raises his gaze and meets her with a soft smile, implying that she will soon go to the academy too, and encouraging her to give her all. After his words, the air seems to tighten. They clearly work. Karen immediately falls silent and leaves Iris's company. Luke takes her hand. He decides it is better to step away and later admit alone he rarely sees his sister, so it is wiser to stay on her good side. As they walk away, Iris remains standing, holding her breath. Her cheeks burn, and an incredible thought clears in her mind. Only one man can overshadow her beauty, Luke, and in this moment of commanding desire, she quietly whispers his name, admitting to herself that she wants him. Several months pass. Karen has already gone to the academy, and Lucas stops going outside. He lies in bed motionless. His indifferent thoughts wander, which book he should have taken with him today. He informs Syrup that they are going for a walk. She holds her breath in surprise, how rarely this happens, and even asks that it doesn't start raining. Meanwhile, Malsaglico blows on thoughts about what is happening. Syrup always handled the shopping, and the merchants themselves came to Luke, and he comes to the conclusion Luke has no friends to visit except himself. She again notes how strange this is. Settling on the bed next to him, Luke asks, whatever the weather, she will go with him. With a slight smile full of understanding, Syrup agrees to his wish. Your journey begins. A ducal carriage, harnessed by two mighty horses, rushes down the road with a sense of urgency. In the carriage, Luke closes his eyes and plunges into memories of how Karen once led them outside. He already feels how much he misses her. His heart grieves. Nearby on the reins, Syrup, hiding her ears and tail in her cloak, confidently holds the way, skillfully steering. Luke announces that they have arrived. They get out onto the street, and Luke surveys their fast ride and notes. No one dares to stop the ducal carriage. A vigilant gaze does not leave him, and he aloud wonders what awaits him next. Their destination reveals itself the Great Motto store. It is a huge department store that Lucas recognizes from the game. Here they sell everything in a row, from equipment to gifts for potential romantic partners. When they enter, they are greeted with a sincere, warm welcome. Luke turns to Syrup and says she can take whatever she wishes. She responds to him gratefully. He immediately encounters a greeting from a well-groomed man. He introduces himself as Motto, the owner. The man flawlessly guesses who he is, the young son of Duke Disgustus. Luke holds back the conclusion. For a merchant, the strongest weapon is information. The owner leads them past the main hall with shops and takes them to a luxurious VIP room, inviting them to sit. Motto, the shop owner, explains, dealing with a boring old man is pure hell. To make everything more interesting, offers to introduce them to his daughter, who will take care of their affairs. Nearby, a guard assures they can ask for anything. After being introduced by her father, a lively young woman steps onto the stage. She calls herself Akari Mado, the 14-year-old daughter of C. Luke immediately recognizes her, one of the main romantic heroines of the game, the very key to the merchant's storyline. Akari warmly greets both Luke and Syrup, says she hopes for good relations, and openly rejoices at meeting the beast folk. In response, Luke and Syrup formally introduce themselves to her. Then Luke gets down to business. He asks what exactly she is looking for today. In his head, Luke Marvel feels relief and joy. Caught his chance even before the academic semester started and met her earlier than he could have imagined. He asks her to simply pick anything she would recommend herself, maybe beauty treatments or some convenient item. Akari is delighted by such a free request, nods energetically, and promises to show him everything. She keeps her word, starting the tour with a smile, and her witty remarks accompany every exhibit. First, she shows a magical hairdryer. After some time passes, Luke emerges from among the purchase manages to get almost everything he was shown. His face shines. He declares that he indeed found good things for himself, and thanks Akara for the help. Then his gaze shifts to Syrup. He asks if she wants something specific for herself. Syrup freezes, embarrassed, replies that no, she doesn't need anything, to be honest. Her hesitation is just a mask for true emotions. She focuses on the thought, since they rarely go shopping together, a gift from him will make her happy. As if on cue, Akari steps forward and extends a small box, asking what Syrup thinks about the red throat inside. Syrup's eyes widen sharply as she gazes at the gift in awe, and the thought arises, this is wonderful. She expresses gratitude, then immediately turns to Luca, sharply objecting. She is only a servant and has no right to accept such a gift. He dismisses her objection and calmly looks at her, stating that they will take it. Then he hands her the box and explains, this is a small token of gratitude for everything, for how attentively she takes care of him. After that, he gently asks if he was mistaken in thinking that she liked it. He stands frozen, watching as Syrup, after a brief hesitation, raises her eyes and meets his with a sly, resigned smile. She quietly mutters that nothing can be done and decides to accept his gift. She turns her back to him and tightens the collar on her neck. Her face is still hidden from his gaze, so she asks for his opinion. She looks straight ahead again. The red choker sits perfectly straight. Akari, standing nearby and watching, exclaims that it suits her very well. Syrup herself, with a satisfied smile, thinks that it is simply wonderful. After this, she turns directly to Luca and asks how she looks. He replies with a barely noticeable blush on his cheeks, that the choker really highlights her luxurious white hair. A compliment from Syrup brings a radiant smile to her face, her eyes closed, sincere and gentle. Luke looks at her and simultaneously feels a tender smile blooming on his own. In his thoughts, he admits that he is incredibly happy because she likes it. After Akari finished shopping, she saw him off near the carriage, saying the trip was extremely successful and adding that she hopes to continue seeing him among her regular customers. When the cart starts moving and drives away, he stops his gaze on the window and thoughtfully reflects. From time to time, doing something like this might not be such a bad idea. While the carriage cuts through the city, his thoughts glide forward to the future. He suddenly realizes that next year he will have to leave home and go to the academy, so he concludes that before that he needs to get to know the world a little. Later, returning to his room, he makes a decision. Before leaving here, he needs to sort out the personal to understand why his former self eventually became an ugly, fat toad. Lying in bed, he jerks up and throws his arms to the sides, holding back his irritation. He feels like he has already hit the cause, but what torment it will be. Despite everything, he decides he will have to do it, with the bitter thought that the lazy path always turns out to be difficult. The flash of starlight highlights the mystery hanging over the physical state of Luca Disgustos. On one side, his current swollen, exhausted face framed by toads and crude, homemade tools. On the other, his former sharp, healthy features, lifted by elegant perfume bottles. One single thought has long gnawed at him from within, deep changes reflected both in his face and figure. He freezes before his reflection and drinks in his own face, trying to understand how he managed to change so drastically. In his memory surfaces the beginning. He was composed, well-groomed, and his current appearance makes this metamorphosis even harder to comprehend. Could an ordinary, purely hedonistic life really be the cause of all this? He had already checked the allergy and weak constitution version, but got no answers. The products in this world are the same as anywhere else, so he had no leads left. A sudden thought flashes in him. Maybe Karen knows more. He immediately focuses on the details of cooking, on how it is cooked, and exactly which ingredients everything consists of. On this thought, he immediately turns to Karen. She gives testimony and nervously hurries to note down everything she knows. The ingredients he described, she explains, have properties almost entirely characteristic of toxins. Lucas processes this and realizes toxins can work in medicine, but they can also be used to disrupt the body's functions or even cause death depending on the method of application. Listening to her words, he restrains his emotions, and hardness grows on his face. If toxins have interfered, this can finally explain the strange change in his appearance. The main figure definitely deserves to be carefully investigated. The investigation leads him to Sirop, and he asks her about her memories of his childhood. She recalls that until he turned 4, he was a sweet baby who constantly ate and slept, and besides very tender skin, she assures there were no other physical abnormalities. She continues her story. She says that after that his condition began to fluctuate and worry for about a year, and he was able to stabilize only around his 6th birthday. She was stunned when in the middle of the birthday dinner he suddenly collapsed, although before that he looked quite happy and seemed to be savoring the moment. Luca interrupts. He simply ran out of mana and fainted from overload. He persistently demanded more precise explanations and inquired who then prepared his food. Sirop replied that previously the kitchen was run by the chef, but immediately after that dinner, he was forced to resign, and since then the chief manager took on all the cooking duties. The sentence comes together in the last pieces of the puzzle, and he understands it with cold, unquestionable certainty. Everything fits. It turns out the poisoned dishes were prepared by the managing senior servant himself. He found the answer and entered the room, greeted the chief economist, who was tied to a chair, and his head was completely wrapped in bandages. The economist flinched from surprise. He took up the interrogation and began to explain. Supposedly, he had thought everything over for a long time. He immediately threw the question aside to the captive manager. Why was it exactly he, Luke, who gained the reputation of a disgusting fat toad? He thought coldly. Under normal circumstances, this would never have happened to him. And then, without the slightest warmth, he thanked him for preparing his food every day. He relaxed back onto the large, soft, slippery mass and used it as a pillow. Then he continued speaking aloud, mumbling that, unfortunately, his diet never got along with him. Leaning very close to the frightened man, he immediately spoke the answer himself. He was being poisoned. The servant manager instantly broke out in a heavy sweat, and his breath caught in his throat. The frightened servant jumped up at the shout and admitted that his duties were entrusted to him by the head of the Disgustos family. Luca calmly clarified whether it means that he is carrying out his father's orders. He continued his logic and assumed. The family did not even know that he was capable of using healing magic to neutralize the poison. Then the reasoning stopped at the steward. Surely, he had a hard time because he not only refused to began to recover. And so he concluded, no one would dare to dirty their own hands because no one was indifferent enough to do anything. He narrowed his eyes, throwing out loud the final, direct blow to the accusation, and turned to the steward. Was it not he who poisoned his food? The latter only stammered in horror, unable to form a single coherent word. Stewart instantly broke down. He lowered his head and began begging for forgiveness. Luke looked at him, amazed at how quickly he admitted everything. He decided that instant capitulation was a boring way out. He honestly admitted, if the resistance were in charge, he would crave revenge much more strongly. After that, he said he would forgive, but a hidden condition was clearly read in his intonation. In a trembling voice, the servant cautiously asked what he intended to do next, and Luke answered clearly. He would not kill him. Instead, the man would become a subject for his magic. Extending his hand forward, Luke began to form a complex magical sign in the air, then added that it would be only a minor punishment. He completes the spell and pronounces the sentence on the captive, steward the gift of Linny. The old man is enveloped by a swirling vortex of dark energy. His hands are magically bound before him as consciousness fades. Glancing at the consequences, he calmly and indifferently notes how the magic worked on the person. In the caretaker's eyes no emptiness, there is neither will nor desire left in them. Lucas sees that the manager has calmly settled into the high-backed chair and sends him off, orders him to return to his duties. Along with these words, clarity descends on the young master about where to go next. His thoughts again rush to the main author of the plan, the one he stubbornly considers the true enemy, his own father, Duke Disgustus. When his father rejects the dismissal of some ordinary servants, there are reasons for this indifference, but direct confrontation will only cause unnecessary problems, so he chooses not elimination, but incapacitation. Like pieces on a game board, he will simply arrange his father's pawns so that they lose power and cannot resist. The father will remain on the field, but will no longer be able to do anything against them. Later, when he is walking through the corridors of the estate, Sirop approaches him. She asks where he was, and he evasively replies saying he just stepped out for a short while. She presses on persistently, voicing her confidence that he must come to the academy, while simultaneously asking if he has already planned something else. A piquant spark in his gaze slides over her, mirrors her question, and clarifies whether she would be pleased to learn that he is, after all, indeed going. Despite the tension, Sirop still looks satisfied, clearly shows that she wants to stay close to him. Then Luke confesses why he hesitates. Training at the academy carries a high risk of death. Therefore, retreating is a wise choice. He adds that his decision is already final. If he goes there, she will have to part with him, so he just stretched the remaining time. When his palm gently rests on her head, a calm, composed expression settles on Sirop's face. She comes to a quiet decision. Her home is no longer guaranteed Safatiso. She must act alone to maintain the very peaceful, measured way of life she values so much. In Luke's mind, a grand strategy took shape. He would act from the shadows, subtly pushing the main heroes of the story. His goal was to bring the royal family and nobility to an inevitable clash, and in the turbulent chaos, ensure that the father, Duke Disgustos, was destroyed. He admitted this was supposed to be the simplest way to survive, but the main thing did not change. He was reborn as a truly unbearable character. However, inside there was a tiny relief. He found himself in a game world he truly loved. His pensive expression suddenly hardened, turning into pure determination. He was not going to simply retreat and let himself be killed. Gathering new zeal, he made a decision to fully take on the role of Luca Disgustos and play it to the end with full force. A year later came the day he was to set out on the road. While the carriage waited beside him, Sirop firmly held the farewell words and ordered him to take care of himself. Smiling confidently, he replied that everything would be fine, then turned to the huge, round platforms before the entrance to the exams at the Royal Academy of Alecida. He absorbed everything he saw at once, while the teacher announced that the entrance exam would consist of 3 tests: magic, practical skills, and subject tests. He stood among the other candidates and recalled, the best students in each subject were awarded scholarships regardless of who they were. Realizing this, he decided not to work too hard so as not to stand out. Next to him, a girl spoke up and directly stated that she found the neighboring beastmen disgusting. His gaze fixed on the group lining up for the practical exam. Next to them stood a girl with distinct cat ears, seemed to catch his gaze and twitched slightly, shuddering. He watched her with his gaze as she entered the arena for duels, and a sudden recognition flashed sharply across his face. She immediately fell into his memory. Ruby the Adventurer, a beastly man with green hair and emerald eyes, exactly one of the heroines of this game. The practical exam has just started and Ruby immediately jumped into the fight. In a fraction of a second, she closed the distance and delivered a powerful kick to the hefty instructor. She dashed forward with stunning speed. A kick struck the instructor's guard, a thunderous crack tore through the space, and shockwaves rolled through the air. The instructor froze in amazement. The power of the beastman's physique was combined with such unusual techniques. When the final spark of the Ruby clash flared up, the next name was announced: Luke Hugelo Dislustos. From the stands, Luke watched and noted, only now is everything starting to accelerate. Just as he was about to take a step forward, another candidate was already being led to the trial. A young boy with two-toned hair clenched a test slime in his hand. It flashed with light. The examiner called his power non-elemental magic, and the boy only sighed heavily and cried out in pain. His everyday complaint was immediately overwhelmed by a storm. A giant stream of raw magical power exploded, and the stone floor in the examination hall was completely destroyed. The uncontrollable destructive force made the girl next to him suddenly exclaim, trying to stop him, "Enough!" while they were naming the next candidate. From afar, Ruby watched what remained after the event. With a faint, hidden intrigue on her face, her lips barely curved into a smile. When the practical exams ended, the teacher collapsed helplessly on the floor. Luke looked around and couldn't understand where the lively beastman girl had gone, but he noticed her. She was quietly humming to herself and walking away, and he decided that most likely he would see her again at school. The next day, Cyro appeared near Luca and showed him the results. In that game he performed flawlessly. The exam scores were fantastic, so he had nothing to fear from failure. Now an official student, he confidently walked through the academy grounds in his new uniform. The teenage character of the game, World, now stood next to Luke as an equal student, and he held himself confidently. The strategic simulation of an adult novel was about to begin. Neat, freshly sewn school clothes emphasize Luca repels those who like his reflection. He admits to himself, now he is truly handsome, and this is a sharp contrast to who he was before. When he is about to leave, Syrup announces that the carriage is already waiting, and her thoughts reveal admiration for his transformation. Today his new life begins. His path leads to the Royal Academy of Alessidae, the oldest and most authoritative institution in the entire kingdom. He is confident that this is the stage where different ideas and hidden motives converge. Almost all the nobility appear at the meeting. After that, the academy has just begun to accept the most talented commoners to attract more students. This diverse student body needs such a program because the kingdom constantly suffers from dungeons. Monsters continuously crawl out of them. Because of this, self-defense through combat, magic, and ordinary disciplines is considered a mandatory foundation in their education. Besides training, the academy serves as a scientific center. Here they pay special attention to the development of magic. Within these walls, they say, one can even study under legendary magicians as instructors. The two basic game mechanics in this world are increasing your own stats and interacting with romantic interest lines. The story branch and the characters you could meet depended on which stats you achieved. To get on the right route, you had to carefully control which events triggered and which flags activated. He cemented his plan. He would play the role of the villain Luca, who always stays close to the protagonist. From there, from his shadow, he would use the knowledge gained in his past life to support the hero and, most importantly, avoid the usual paths where Luca inevitably gets killed. But he still understood. His path might already have been laid out to develop quite differently than in the game. After all, he was no longer that disgusting, fat frog-like creature they wanted him to be. His will was strengthening, hardening with every moment. He had to stand firm and survive for the sake of those he cared about. This order was made for them. Even before they set off, Syrup asked if he remembered everything. He smiled and confirmed that he did, thanked her for preparing everything, and her face suddenly clouded with a shadow of worry. Her care was felt without any words. She complained. She wanted to enter the academy as his companion to clean his room, but she was not allowed because of a silly rule. Companions are forbidden to differ in age from their student by more than 2 years. Luke mentally noted. Over the years, her sense of duty only grew stronger. She listened as Lucas squeezed her hands and explained the academy rules. Students might be allowed visits, but the strict age limit put everything in place. Since Syrup was 7 years older than him, unfortunately, she did not qualify. Lucas said he would be glad to see her there, but she could not be admitted. He admitted that for this reason, small children are often assigned a companion of roughly the same age, but still honestly said that he had no one like that. Her face filled with anxiety. She voiced doubt whether the maid appointed by the Duke would manage properly, and added, Luca always moved at his own pace. He tried to calm her, assuring that everything would be resolved. He smiled, letting her understand that he was capable of taking care of himself. He also added that Karen was studying at the academy too. This seemed to ease her thoughts a little. Her determination did not waver for a step. Clenching the pain in her gaze, she firmly and without unnecessary words declared that she wanted to be the one to take care of him. When he glanced at their joined hands, the tension in his eyes faded. He suddenly remembered that Syrup had stood nearby and cared for him since he was very little. Then he quietly thanked her in his soul. He replayed the past in his mind. His family never gave him warmth or tenderness, but it more than filled that emptiness. For him, she was exactly that, only one. Only family. She had always been his only partner and caretaker, and recently had taken on more and more responsibilities. He realized the previous days would exhaust her if he was not by her side, and suddenly, as if fired by determination, he called her by name. He pressed her to himself in a tight embrace, hiding his face in her hair. He whispered to her that she had done more for him than he could ever repay, and promised, someday he would definitely reward her. She clung to him, tightly gripping the back of his uniform with her hands, while he proclaimed with iron conviction that he would surely keep his promise. The last sips of the old syrup clung to the last embrace. Their farewells weighed heavily on the heart. He said he would miss her, and she tearfully responded the same. He stepped back and gave her an order. While he was away, she would hold on to the home. He promised to return before the end of the year and asked her to wait. She agreed without hesitation. When the farewells had been exchanged, the horse-drawn carriage left the estate. As it rolled through the city streets, he caught himself thinking, even though they would not be together for some time, This separation only pushed him more strongly to protect the Sirup heaven more carefully in the future. He decided to count the days until his return. He remembered the promise he had just made to her. As soon as he graduated and left the territory, she would go with him. Sirup was initially stunned, realizing she had thought she had no future, but he firmly declared he would not let her go for anything. Her surprise faded, replaced by calm and determination. She promised not to leave his side for a step, and also set a condition. Karen must agree to this. He then smiled. It pleased her to hear that she would truly keep her word. Then he went even further and voiced a proposal. They should become a real family. What was said confused Sirup, but her bewilderment instantly melted away. Only pure joy remained when she agreed. Looking at her delight, he noted to himself how sweet she was, and honestly admitted in his thoughts that he loved her. Leaving behind the home and memories, he reached the academy. A hooded silhouette bowed and wished him a good stay. He briefly waved in response, signaling acceptance, and walked through the grand gather, where the next chapter of his life was to begin on the academy's main street. Near the reception area in Dori, where he was to meet other new students, a young woman in glasses appeared. She approached him and politely asked if she could call him Luxemond. This barely stirred a feeling of familiarity in him. She apologized for the late introduction and gave her name Labura Glitzko. She explained that she was 15 and the daughter of Baron Malsa Glitzko, head of the Ministry of Magic, and that she recognized him immediately from her father's description. He is confused by this very kinship. She is the daughter of Malsan. Libera explains that her father himself arranged it so that she would become his servant and guardian. But as soon as this new family bond appears, everything begins to waver. She notes that only he calls Malsan by the honorary title. When Lucas tries to recall how Malsa is related to Morsky, Libera demands, "Stop these addresses and just call her Libera." He looks closely at his new servant and asks if she likes magic, adding that her father Malsan told him so. Libera's face lights up with genuine joy. She replies that she adores it, and her main dream is to get a position in the Ministry of Magic. He asks why this could be a problem at all, and she answers, "Often boys and girls mock those who dream of joining the ministry service." Without losing his mood, he fixes his gaze on her eyes and confidently, firmly states that he knows she can reach her goal. He does not stop and continues to encourage her. He says she is talented and works hard on magic, so she will definitely succeed. Libera is noticeably moved by his unexpected support. Her face blooms, her eyes narrow in a happy smile as she thanks him sincerely. Her gratitude instantly dissolves into hot determination as she declares that she wants to become closer to him. He doubts this, and she explains, as long as he is near, she wants to take care of him. Lucas rejects her idea, saying he can manage on his own, and at the same time continues to wonder why she is so drawn to him. Her face changes, her gaze becomes extremely focused. Pressing her palm in front of her to see him better, she states that his magic is a kind of art, and this deep thought sharply clarifies in her. Suddenly he is overwhelmed by a memory, what he heard about her from the world of games. Libura is a magic maniac. Her obsessive love for magic constantly goes beyond reason, which causes trouble. For this she was given that very title. In the game, she could only be encountered when raising her own magical attribute. Hearing this, he decides that it is best to change the subject. He suggests first finishing the dormitory application and talking about magic later, but Libero waves off his words. The documents are already ready. Her straightforwardness makes him wonder if she is overdoing it with too determined zeal. Then she suggests they find a place that serves tea to talk. Now they are sitting in a cafe. Luke inhales the fragrant steam from his own cup and agrees, noting that this tea is best suited for talking about magic. With his permission, she immediately asks to move on to her personal opinion about his original spell. While he sips tea, he thanks her for the always tasty blend and says, "Continue." She bursts into analysis, starting with how attributeless magic works in practice. The excitement grows instantly. Hands sharply and convincingly wave in the air as she reverently repeats again, "Attributeless magic." Lucas silently watches and thinks whether Tommelsan sparked such a deep interest in her. She listened while Abura finished the assessment, and her gaze burned with scientific excitement. In short, she thought, the potential of Val would be used without limits. Although she was already well versed in the topic, she was confident there were chances to develop even more. He slowly sipped his drink and thought that Labura would turn out to be the perfect partner for research. Her enthusiasm was overflowing, it was contagious, like a virus, just like her father's. She said she was eagerly looking forward to seeing what exactly he would propose. Nearby, a lively conversation continues, and outside at the table sit two people both completely immersed in what they share, a passion for magic. After some time, she noticed, only a few minutes remained until the main event of the day, so she suggested setting off. They got up from their seats and headed to the destination. They reached the great hall of the Magic Academia, gigantic amphitheater, already filled with students for the entrance ceremony. Looking over the crowd from the balcony, he recognized familiar faces, same ones from the game. All the key players had gathered in one place. A sudden, piercing sensation interrupted his observation, overwhelmed him from within like a wave. From the crowd below, a sharp, hostile presence struck like a wavy emanated from a single point, from the Emperor's sword. The young man's gaze sharply soared upward and fixed directly on Luca's position. A faint smile touched his lips as the thought formed in his mind. I understand, this is. He held the gaze in response, and from within came a troubling feeling. Had he already been noticed? The gaze of the Sword Emperor met his openly, without any concession, and a grim premonition settled in him. The sharp gaze of the Sword Emperor pierces him. Luke returns it with the same steady, unwavering look. In his thoughts, he notes, this must be their first meeting, but the tense focus of the boy on the other side suggests there is already some connection between them. In the spacious grand hall, Labura Glicko addresses Luca, asking him to explain what is happening. She aloud wonders why one particular student stared at him as if he were his sworn enemy. Labura calls the boy Dan a knight pupil. Luca objects, recalling, the Marshall family leads a hostile noble faction, so they have been enemies since birth. Labura adds that she knows Dan is very skilled in martial arts. She mentally runs through even more details from the game's lore reference. Dan's rating sounds like growth, and Lijin from the House of Marshals like the energy of an attribute. Libero recalls that Lijin is the childhood friend of the main hero, and a likely candidate for marriage on the standard knight route, a devoted heroine whose love for the protagonist makes her warm and vulnerable. Thoughts do not subside. Libera continues to run through another scenario, a path where Lucas captures Lijin, makes her his wife, and turns her into an enemy he will have to fight. In this battle, she sees the main highlight, and in her reflections, she comes to the conclusion. The flawless, devoted nature of Lijin ultimately turns against her. Meanwhile, a memory of Dan, commoner, surfaces. He managed to get into the academy as Lijin's servant because his late father was an honest knight. Because of this story, Dan strives to continue his father's work and become a knight for House Marshall, and this only fuels his hatred for the disgust carried by these family people. Luke tensely tracks Dan's gaze. Within himself, he weighs the boy's size and strength, and feels the thought tighten that trouble will likely come because of this boy. But Luke's attention quickly shifts as soon as the graduate's speech is announced, and a girl named Irina Shaley Boyle-Cedos is called to the stage. Luke introduces the audience to Irina, the first princess of the kingdom. He immediately emphasizes, she is a newcomer and a representative of the first intake, while Labura grumbles about how boring school life drags on. When Luke asks if she is interested in the princess, Labura brushes off the very thought. She admits, Irina is indeed beautiful, but says that thanks to her sister Iris, she is used to beauties, so she did not pay attention to Irina even in the game. He tells her that the most important thing is that he already has a fiancée whom he truly loves, but with two people to keep an eye on, he has no right to relax. After that, he asks Labura if she would mind if he sleeps, pulling out a large fluffy pillow, and he adds that they can talk about everything else later. Labura smiles and agrees. Yes, that sounds wonderful. The ceremony continues. Luke sleeps soundly on his pillow. Libera watches him warmly. After some time passes, she gently wakes him, informing him that the ceremony is over and all the other students have already left. Then she curiously examines his pillow and recognizes it as the very one about which rumors circulate. He immediately confirms that it is indeed it, and smiling explains. His father once told him that he stayed afloat on the water when they first met. Then he says that Labura is a nice girl and suggests giving her a ride sometime, insisting that the feeling is simply wonderful. She thanks him and replies that she appreciates people who honestly say what they want. But in a moment, her mood darkens. She clenches her fists and complains that next is orientation. Luke sharply pulls her by the hand as soon as he says they need to go. Labura freezes in surprise and chokes on her words. She insists that she has never held a boy's hand before. Luke waves it off, saying it's all right, and blushing, whispers calmly. She notices that his palm is soft. Luke twists his smile crookedly and declares, since he has already stolen the girl's first moment, he must now take responsibility for it. After that, he offers to escort her to their class. Lijin Marshall looks away as they walk away hand in hand, and from a distance, she drowns them in a heavy, angry gaze. Her face hardens with rage. She barely trembles and whispers through her teeth, "Rat." Hearing this accusation, Libero sharply turns around and exclaims that they are not doing anything like that, while Luke calmly tries to calm her down. Labura asks Luke if he is still angry about that previous clash, but he dismisses the very thought. Luke says there is no point in wasting energy on that, better let that energy work in conversation with her. Clearly shining, Labura nods and picks up. She also likes their conversations. They decide to quickly settle the orientation issue as soon as they step into the huge auditorium designated for Class 0. Libra notices that everyone is already in their places and makes it clear. Everyone can freely choose their seat. Inside the hall, a man with long dark hair positions himself so that everyone can see him and introduces himself as their teacher Glorn Research. Luke instantly recognizes him from the game. After that, an assistant teacher, a woman named Silas, comes on stage. Luke notes to himself, she is hundreds of years old, and in the shop, she is the most stubborn candidate for a romantic line in the game plan. The next student, an ordinary scholarship student named Muriel, tells the whole class that in the academy, origin or status does not matter. They will be judged only by abilities. This is heard, and at the same moment, Lysian Marshall raises her hand and asks how exactly they plan to measure their level and determine their place in the ranking. The teacher thanks her for the precise, truly excellent question. In response, Glorin sharply reveals a new invention, the magic clock. He orders the students to pass their own mana through it. When Luca does this, the clock flashes with a bright beam of light. The teacher explains in detail that this invention reads their unique signature and allows immediate verification of grades and ranking position. Luca stares at the screen and recognizes it. It is the stat menu from the game, showing his name, age, level, and class. He realizes, although detailed statistical indicators are hidden, general ranking positions are available to the teaching staff. After this, he opens last year's results and notes that Arena took first place in the overall standings, while Ruby claimed the top position specifically for practical skills. Continuing the review, he notices, Labura holds first place in magic, and Mural first in studies. He himself is second. Glorin, reading his immersion in thought, catches his attention and asks him to speak, proudly stating that magical tools are the best resource for advancing humanity. Luke sharply turns to Labura to ask about the grades, but she looks distracted, murmuring that their teacher is a magical maniac, and acerbically insists that he still hasn't understood who they really are. The classroom buzz and rustle only grow until Silas steps forward and declares, cooling off time is over, after which he announces he will now talk about academy life. She addresses the students and emphasizes, their development is their personal responsibility, and steps and ranks do not exist just for show. In a tone of finality, she issues a stern warning. If grades start to slip, they will be mercilessly transferred to a lower class. But at the end, she adds that there is only one exception. She names the sole concession the Emperor's Swordbearer Cup. The assistant mentor explains, if a student has low magical and academic grades, confident play in this prestigious tournament will still give them a chance to remain in the upper classes. This is the Academy's main event, held annually and followed worldwide. She details what the prize is for winning, the honorable title of knight and a promotion leading up to noble status with significant privileges. Within the school system tied to the cup, training duels are allowed. They are called ranked battles. She briefly outlines the rules of these fights, and Luke listens attentively, immediately recognizing the scheme. Lower-ranked students have the right to challenge those above, and the challenged cannot refuse. The winner takes the opponent's rank and is transferred to the corresponding class. The loser cannot challenge the same person again for 6 months, and if they accumulate 5 losses against the same opponent, they are permanently barred from repeat challenges. He fully realizes these rules were set up just like in the game, deliberately constructed to pit him, the villain, and Dan, the protagonist, face to face. Luca's role was predetermined. In a ranked battle, he is to be the first to fall. This decision is necessary to ignite their inevitable enmity. While Luca thoughtfully weighs all this, Dan again confirms his goal to win the cup and earn the title of Honorable Knight. Dan's determination grows stronger. He raises his hand and asks when the ranked battles can start. Silas replies, the fight will begin as soon as they register on their clocks. Without hesitation, Dan declares he wants to challenge right now. He rises from his seat, points across the hall, and roars his challenge. Luke Higelo, repulsed by the mood, retorts, fight me. On Luca's clock, the challenge crystallizes. The duel officially begins. From his seat, the main character watches the game and immediately recognizes, this is a training fight. As soon as Luca has to meet his opponent's gaze, he grimly accepts his role, understanding that this is the first task that will appear before him from the villainous noble. The clash repeats the key training fight from the game. In that initial story, Luke, who was accepted to study magic due to exceptional talent, lost to Dan the Knight Apprentice. It was this defeat that ignited in the original Luke a thirst for revenge, and after that, he relentlessly targeted Dan. Luke remained in the background, grinding his teeth from his own resentment, while Dan was able to calmly live through busy days at the academy, gaining the favor and strong friendship of those around him. He calls it the original idea, and with proud arrogance, he rushes into a furious, fierce dance after being provoked by some ordinary commoner. But this Luke is completely different. Throwing a contemptuous gesture with his hand, he sharply cuts off, insisting that he will not do it. Dan sits in the chair and looks completely indifferent. Luke calmly states that he has rank 2 and asks what rank Dan has. Dan perceives this lack of interest as cowardice and bursts out shouting in response, accusing him of fear. He calmly rejects the accusation and explains, he will not fight a fool who cannot understand a simple situation. Then he emphasizes that Dan has a chance to raise his rank and that he himself gains no benefit from it. In response, Dan roars that his rank is 20. Nearby, Lysian Marshall restrains her anger, boiling, and declares that she will not tolerate this. He moves sharply forward to confront Luke directly. She fixes her gaze on him and demands an answer as to why he is avoiding the fight. In a raised voice, she insists that as a nobleman of her glorious country, accepting the challenge is a matter of course for him. Her fiery speech suddenly dies down as she reconsiders everything like a short circuit. She mumbles that she knows he is stubborn and hot-tempered, but still his grades are excellent. Blinking her eyes slightly worried, she abruptly retracts her words and decides, better not to get involved. Turning and walking away, she brushes off the whole story too troublesome, so not worth attention, and disappears from the frame. Inside, Lucas once again engraves his own credo in his mind. To intervene directly contradicts his principle of lazy non-interference. He agrees only to provide support from the shadows, from behind the scenes. Suddenly, a new voice breaks into the conversation. Irina Alessida steps forward and directly states that she sincerely wants to see a fight between the two of them, emphasizing how advantageous and interesting this confrontation is. Dan, who has an excellent practical record, faces Disgustos with an excellent magical one. Her gaze locks onto Luke. Calmly, without unnecessary words, she informs him, refusal of the duel will result in his fall in rank. Then she speaks even more sharply, appealing to his position, and emphasizing that a nobleman of this country must lead people, and insistently demand that he follow the Academy's rules. His patience is incredibly irritated by the princess's stubbornness. She stands before him, unyielding and categorical, declaring that it is his duty, and directly says she will not allow him to refuse the duel. She presses further and throws, in the words of their teacher, in the Academy, ranks are not taken into account, only grades matter, and only they. Logic drives him into a dead end. He exhales deeply through his teeth, because he understands, to refuse both the princess and the duke's daughter at once is incredibly difficult. Inside, he admits to himself a genuine dislike for Princess Irina, while Libera Glicko watches with concern. With a heavy, resigned tone, he finally gives in. You are right, princess. His phrase reaches Dan, who stands aside and watches closely from afar together with the Lysian Marshal. Inside Dan, a thought flashes. Luke looks too exhausted to stop the predetermined course of events alone. Resigned to the verdict, Luke slowly walks through the Academy grounds, and nearby towers a huge arena coliseum. Next to him, the slug Val floats in the air, muttering that he has no choice, yet still complaining. This is a real hassle, and he really does not want to move so much. Walking alongside Libera and Dan, he runs through the next step in his mind. To fulfill his role, he firmly knows, the duel must be lost, but how exactly to do this does not form a clear plan. Val, noticing his inner tension, flies closer and asks if he is okay. Libera turns to him and says she has learned that he hates exercises. After that, she adds details about his opponent. She says that Dan studies at night at the Marshal Dougal house, a family known for their skilled fighters. And she adds, based on his exam results, it is clear that he is no stranger to fights. Suddenly and confidently, he responds to her words with a smile, glances at Val, and reassures the slug, saying everything is fine, and for him this will be a real trifle. The sharp and complete change in his behavior throws Libera off balance. She squints through her glasses, her eyes widen, and a newly born admiring respect for his unexpected confidence flashes in them. She said that Luke is truly a mysterious figure. He invented magic that no one else has yet conceived, but at the same time refuses to fight, although he has a noble status. Luke only listened silently and asked if that was true. She quickly assured him that she spoke sincerely and meant it as a compliment. And when Luke asked what magic invention and refusal to fight had to do with it, she explained, for noble people, honor and pride matter too much. He smiled in response and said that if that is so, then it is even good. After that, he added, he does not want Libera to dislike him, a phrase that completely threw her off balance. A broken composer her impression, and she vehemently denied this thought, shouting passionately that she could never despise him. While they were heading, Dan and Lysian Marshall, their opponents, broke ahead, demonstrating a grim, stubborn zeal. Both their gazes were fixed only on the distance. Their road led to a huge coliseum, the very place called the arena. Luke made a remark. He hadn't stepped here since the entrance exam. A proctor appeared on the sandy platform and, stopping, looked around. His classmates gathered in the stands to witness the first-ranked duel. Luke just watched motionlessly, while Dan warmed up, preparing for the fight. He turned to Luke and declared that he intended to straighten out his rotten temper. Dan accused him of slacking off during the exam, but Lucas just ordered the worried worker to wait and was not at all embarrassed even by the threat. Luke simply met the opponent's anger with a contemptuous sigh. He explained to Dan he could not be ignored, and one should be grateful at least for the fact that he agreed to fight at all. The troll did his job, the provocation worked. Dan stubbornly demanded Luke's level, explaining that this was exactly the number that grows after victories over monsters. Luke casually replied, since this is a game, he immediately brought the indicator to the maximum as soon as he first saw it, and since then did not worry because strategy and basics were much more important. Luke calmly holds his gaze opposite his opponent Dan, who just stands, frozen in confusion. As soon as Luke explains that his level is only 1, Dan's eyes sharply widen, not believing what he heard. His shock instantly broke into rage. Clenching his fist, he thundered that Luke was worse than he imagined, and demanded an answer. How could a nobleman never have faced a monster even once? After the sharp outburst, the voices of 2 proctors echoed through the arena. They solemnly introduced Challenger Dan and the higher-ranked defender Luke Hugelo Disgustos, and only then ordered them to step forward. Dan in response tightly gripped his sword with both hands, staring at the opponent and filled with iron determination. Luke, on the contrary, looked completely calm. He carelessly wished him a good fight. His face flared with concentration as he waited for the signal to start the ranking match. When the proctor thundered, announcing the start of the clash, Dan immediately rushed forward. Lucas, however, was in no hurry. He only called Val, his slug companion. Inside, he reasoned that in the game he was the one who pushed the moves with attacking teams, but here such hints did not work. He quickly concluded there was only one way left. Dan's blade crashed down on him. He gave Val a short command: maintain full control for exactly 1 minute. At the same time, he asked the slime not to let either of them get seriously hurt, calculated that he could just surrender as soon as he regained consciousness. The slimy mass instantly turned into a blade and deflected Dan's attack with a sharp clatter. Dan froze in shock, and Luke with a gaze that flashed with a completely different light spoke, as if following Vel's order. I am counting on you. His opponent froze in complete confusion, tightly gripping the sword and holding it at the ready. The figure of Luca, now led by Val, loomed near with a confident, anxious smile. For a moment Luke blinked and, groaning, came to his senses. He looked at his own hand. A strange substance covered it, and it was confusing. Nearby, his gaze fixed on Dan. His figure was dissolving and sinking into the void. The duel from which he had just recovered started with a strange, exhausting move. While the sabers dully cut the air against each other below, the body of Luke Disgastos, controlled by someone else, simply reached out and pressed his palm to Dan's forehead. Confused, Dan lost his rhythm and demanded, let him go. A focused expression froze on the face of the creature controlling Luke. She clenched her fist. Beyond sight, the duel had already erupted. The clang of steel echoed through the arena. But Dan no longer hid his tension. His thoughts raced with the speed of panic, and sweat appeared on his skin. He clenched it in his head and noted, as soon as he was forced to act this way, the opponent did not receive fatal injuries. And Dan was sure no matter what happened next, Luke would eventually activate his secret attribute magic and snatch victory, so Dan could not lose in this staged fight. But the opponent, on the contrary, had something else in mind. He rushed forward and blurted out the statement, enough, let's finish this. He lunged with unnatural speed, slid his fingers over Dan's forehead again, and uttered only one command, sleep. Dan tried to resist his muscles and activated his acceleration ability, but it was already too late. The boy's thoughts were icy and measured. He recognized Dan's attribute magica boost that spun his own strengthening like a cheat code. Yet at the same time, the boy noted that due to Dan's inexperience, this buff currently worked less precisely and lacked significant power. He continued the assessment and concluded, due to Dana's low magical endurance, he would not be able to hold on. The sleep spell would prove inevitable. And then a strange thought slipped into his mind. Although he did not fulfill his part to lose, he still did not like the idea of the villain taking the victory. He resisted the magic that compressed space, but his own body refused to obey him. He realized he needed to devise a trap for them to find a way out and save the situation while the crowd watched him. His desperate struggle did not go unnoticed. The spectators froze in astonishment. Lysian Marshall suddenly screamed, unable to contain his anxiety, and threw the question into the air, what exactly is happening? Proctor stood frozen in shock, staring blankly until a giant white body, like a torn clump, burst out of Luca and covered Dan, tossing him high into the air. The voice of Proctor cut through the petrified pauses of the arena and declared Luca the winner. He begged him to stop, just to let Dan get out of his gelatinous cage. Proctor's announcement hangs in the air as Dan's body crashes heavily onto the stone floor. Lysian Marshall freezes in shock, her eyes wide open from the blow of Truthand. She shouts his name. Her surprise instantly turns to rage. She drops to her knees beside the fallen comrade and stares fiercely at Luca, shouting that he is a scavenger. She demands where his worthy pride has gone and accuses him of mocking the victor, even though Den was already unconscious by then. He does not deviate a step from her outburst. With a cold, steady gaze, he bluntly says that at first he did not intend to fight, it was all stirred up by Dan, who pushed the conflict. Then he concludes, Dan should have been prepared for such a result. Then his gaze breaks away from Dan and Lijian, gliding over the silent spectators in the stands. He addresses everyone and declares that from now on he will accept any challenge for a ranked duel. A bold prank knocks Lijian off track only for a moment. Then he raises his hand to his forehead and shows fatigue as if he has just been hit. As if to say, if he is now guaranteed exhausted, then this is a great opportunity for anyone who dares to challenge him. He glides his gaze over the crowd and waits. Will there be at least someone who agrees to the deal? But in responsiently deaf silence. Not waiting for a single step forward, he smiles crookedly, and while their eyes are still fixed on him, decides he will teach them all an important lesson. Sitting in place, Libraglico carefully observes what is happening with a focused and serious face. He begins the lesson and states that he values intelligent people and those who devote themselves to the search for magic. After this, he throws out that he hates fools who rely only on brute force, waves his hand arrogantly toward the lifeless Dana lying on the ground, and declares, if any other barbarian like this dares to challenge him, he wants to guarantee they will never dare challenge him again. A clenched fist freezes in a silent, cruel promise. This is how he emphasizes his threat. In the stands, Irina, Elicitas, and the rest of the students watch. Anxiety and fascination mingle on their faces. Luke turns away with disgust from those who stand aside, and from the consequences of his own victory over the defeated opponents Dan and Lijian. He thinks, now his villainous fame will definitely roll through all the corridors of the class. He would like no one else to dare challenge him, but he accepts the thought that such injustice is the usual order of things. No sooner do her gaze and his thoughts collide than Lijian Marshall appears. She clenches her fist in anger and promises to defeat Dan. She demands that he remember her words. When Lijian abruptly turns and walks away, Luke, standing next to Libraglico, presses with questions uncontrollably. He quietly looks back and asks what that was, wondering if he should have kept his thoughts to himself. Dan swiftly falls onto the stone floor. The slime of Val bursts forward, swelling and catching him to soften the impact. Luke covers his mouth with his hand and reproaches himself for his own laziness and for not intervening earlier. Dan addresses the fallen Dan and states that it is pointless to waste effort studying magic if you so easily succumb to movement. Luke cuts in. Any further explanations are useless, and Dan himself is a fool who sees only his own version of justice. Luke sums up, he has already said enough. Labur agrees with him and asks if he is ready to depart. He does not answer, remains silent, and his face becomes gloomy and detached. A moment of calm reflection is broken by the appearance of Princess Irina Elecitus. She approaches him and speaks directly, confirming that this is indeed Luke, her classmate. He accepts these words without objection, acknowledges his identity, and asks what she wants from him. She throws a remark, only he looks at her with such an expression. In her thoughts, she immediately tracks a failure in compatibility as a commoner. He could never understand her. Then she is overwhelmed by a memory. Her older brother, Testa, once told her about him. She recalls they study in the same group. Her expression softens slightly. She restrainedly and officially acknowledges that he is from the Disgustos family. Then she thanks him for the wonderful fight he showed. Hearing this, she turns to leave and dryly says that this is exactly why she came. As she walks away, Libera asks sharply what that meant. Luke lowers his gaze. A single tear falls as he whispers that he will no longer be forgiven. Burra beams a smile and tells him not to worry about anything, no matter what he says. Then she carefully adds, their first day at school was undoubtedly very tiring. He found Karen on the balcony overlooking the estate at night and curiously asked what she was doing there. He offered her a little rest. She turned to him and met his gaze with a radiant smile, and the neat table was already clean. The food had been cleared away. She expressed her joy. It had been too long since she ate his dishes, and now she was completely full. Then she added that she was sincerely glad for his well-being and that she had put her whole self into preparing the meal for him. Tracy trembled at her words. She continued and said that her food was the best way to give him energy, then jokingly warned he should not praise her too much or she might completely lose control. He smiled and let her understand. If she wanted to do so, everything would be fine, considering her numerous successful business projects. She gave him all the credit, but he gently corrected her, saying he only offered a bit of advice. She fixed her gaze on him, her wide eyes blazing, and insisted. His support was the foundation of the success of the Caribbean house. She inquisitively asked if he was only trying to praise her, and his restraint almost annoyed her. He briefly replied that he was fine and added, "When the Caribbean estate grows wealth, he will also become rich." She laughed and teased. Only a nobleman could say that. Her playful manner vanished instantly. Lish took his hand and asked if he was completely serious. He nodded, yes, serious. Their clasped palms reminded them of all the conversations they had had over the years. Leaning closer, she spoke with tension in her voice, recounting. His family did not care about him. He reached for a healthy life and admired her cooking. She admitted that even knowing everything about her, he responded with unwavering love. Barely vulnerable, she cautiously asked, "Hey, Luke, am I still just your cook?" In response, he knelt before her. He called her the same girl from the past, the one who was there before his engagement, and declared, even if the ducal house and the count's house fell from orbit, for him she would be more important than anything. Then he confessed that he could not live without her. He reached out his hand and asked her to stay close for the night. A smile suddenly lit up her face with genuine surprise, and she jokingly called him a villain, noting that no woman could refuse such a candid, heartfelt request. At dawn, he picks up Karen in his arms and rushes over the rooftops, jumping from roof to roof in the early sky. He tells her that if anyone besides Sirop saw them like that, he would do everything possible to remain unnoticed. As soon as he lands on the stone parapet, his figure immediately disappears from Dan's sight. Is just setting off for his morning run. The night student shudders, noticing someone else on the street, and a member of the Disgusto's family at that. It is inconceivable what could have brought him here at such an hour. His surprise turns into suspicion. He wonders if the young nobleman is plotting something dark. His gaze sharply widens as soon as Luca envelops a radiant, ethereal halo, a technique he recognizes as trace. The aura reveals a vision. Luca's in a clash, rushing through a crowd of enemies with stunning ease, as if every move is calibrated by breath. Dana is paralyzed with delight. This scene looks not like a fight, but like a flawlessly choreographed dance. Luke remembers the battle quite differently. At first, he miscalculated. He decided that a weaker level of the enemy meant an easy victory. But later, he realized the strength of the body is not tied only to the level. His opponents had other indicators that were too inflated, so he had to find a way to bridge the colossal gap in their power. The overwhelming realization of Luca's true strength painfully strikes Dan. He clenches his fist in anger, grinding his teeth, because he finally understands. The boy he had dismissed as a spoiled nobleman is actually hardened by training with the same fierceness that surpasses his own, and this truth stings more than any blow to the body. He runs through his own path in his mind, how he was relentlessly tempered, and how he thought only about fighting to become a knight worthy of a battle name. He thought that this alone was enough, but now he realizes the course he chose will never bring him to Luca's level, and he is tormented by the question of what exactly he lacks. He fixes his gaze upward into the boundless, empty sky, and suddenly he comes to a conclusion that tightens his chest. The world is much bigger and far more complex than he ever imagined. When dawn falls on the quiet bastions, he makes a decision to think independent, find his own way forward. With renewed determination, he bursts into a run again. Instantly, he finds his greatest flaw, a failure in that he did not use his own mind. Yes, his physical strength undoubtedly grows from the chosen fighting style, but he admits he neglected his studies and remained without the systematic conditions of the academy. Despite this, he is determined to improve. He bursts into a shout again with new strength, insisting that he wants to defeat Lake, and this, he proclaimed, will be truly interesting. Lake, noticing him, pressed his palm to his mouth. He saw no chance that Dan would actually win, but the boyish zeal was impossible to deny. The night student twisted a smile through the bandages and waved off defeat as if it were just one case. He promised someday he would definitely surpass Lo. After that, he sharply turned and dashed off, noting in his thoughts, for now, Luca had gone too far, couldn't even catch him out of the corner of his eye. When Dan left, Luca remained alone. A warm, healing glow emanated from his chest. Later, in the spacious banquet hall of the academy, Luke and Labura prepared to have breakfast. Iris was already seated and slowly sipping her morning honey tea. She greeted them both with a friendly smile. She made a remark to Luca and clearly said that he needed to eat properly, as he should. Taking another sip of tea instantly, she mentally processed a strange contradiction. His carefree attitude toward everything despite low blood pressure. While he stood before her, Iris continued speaking and explained. Admission to the academy revealed a completely different side in her older sister. It seemed she had learned to be attentive. Soft posture and manner of speaking with representatives of the high nobility were so well liked by people that some even began to call her Devon. At the welcome party for freshmen, she was the center of attention. Luke recalled that event. He himself also spoke as a representative of the first year, but rumors about his connection with the royal faction spread so instantly that he immediately grew tired of those gatherings. Labura sharply snapped a remark, hurriedly apologized to Irasama, and immediately noticed that her sister was drinking too much. Luca was frankly surprised by what he heard. After that, Labura enthusiastically began to suggest they should develop a supplement that helps with low blood pressure. While they were talking, a sternly determined student strode past them. His appearance immediately reminded Luca's. His debut fight at the academy had already turned into a loud, sensational incident known to almost everyone. This incident immediately outlined the political boundaries among the students. Luca, having just joined the royal faction, felt envy and anger in response. Meanwhile, the aristocratic faction looked at them with respect and reverence. The neutrals and commoners only watched the situation with curiosity, not knowing how exactly to behave as the new rules of power unfolded. He leaned back in his chair and sighed with relief. The intense shock from the duel finally subsided, and he felt he could rest at least a little. Now, at least, he would no longer be disturbed. Therefore, he would be able to focus properly on his studies. His thoughts returned to the academic program. He learned that classes there are divided into two types: compulsory subjects that provide basic knowledge and elective courses in magic and practical skills. First, however, it was necessary to register for the courses. A wide smile spread across his face. He thought, in the game, classes had their roles for leveling up stats, and that doesn't work here. He was left free to mix his favorite disciplines however he wanted. He instantly decided to stay away from any practical skills. Since he already had enough strength, he focused only on magic. After all, he believed that without deep knowledge in magic, it would be impossible to arrange life in a measured leisure. At that moment, Libra declared that she had already made a decision. She chooses to study magic and magical instruments, and the rest she selects with basic courses. When today's lesson is over, she suggested moving on. Ascending the luxurious stairs, she promptly suggested going into a separate training room. She explained that it was a private space where one could master and practice magic and other skills. She continued to explain the academy system. Access to the arena, classrooms, and training halls was determined by class rank. Yet despite this, Class 0 was given priority access to everything at once so that its students would receive the best conditions. Walking through the long corridor, she added, student rankings were made public to ignite the spirit of competition. Her gaze was focus-edged, sharply pointed at a row of doors and announced, "This is." The doors opened and they stared into the spacious empty hall, like a huge cave. Libera apologized for such a deserted expanse and promised to add something there later. In the middle of the giant room, Karen C. Caribbean was sitting on her knees on the floor. Suddenly, an incredible force burst from her under her knees. The stone floor exploded with cracks. Wherever the eye could see, the fractures spread in rings until the earth tore apart under the weight of immense pressure. Her power tore away from the spot and left the training hall in complete ruin. A crumb hung in the air, and the walls were deeply scarred by the impact of her magic's force. After this devastation, Libera clasped her hands and with affected solemnity declared that she had restored the expanded space. Luke froze, staring in shock. He asked if it was her first time with such magic. Libera confirmed, yes, the first time. She added that these were not the kind of spells found in books, so for someone like her, it was an extremely rare thing. She had limited almost all her training to home practice. With a confident smile, Luke offered her everything he could as a teacher, and she immediately agreed to his proposal. After that, she waved her hand at the light figure on the floor and explained, "This is a magic circle, although it belongs to ordinary things." Then she clarified that the circle is needed to keep the magic in a stable state, and that studying is necessary to correctly draw the diagrams. Otherwise, the spell simply will not start. He froze for a moment, pressing Val to the slime in his palm and let his thoughts gather. It occurred to him, magic is convenient, but every convenience has its price, as much power as it gives. Unaimed, non-elemental magic easily falls to hand if you're used to it, but without imagination it immediately turns into a burden. Elementary magic, on the other hand, at first seems simpler, but for real use requires deep understanding and long training. Her gaze flashed as soon as she heard his analysis. She stated that he should like it because the topic seemed deep and interesting to her. He enthusiastically picked it up and agreed lively. After the completed theoretical conversation, they sat down at the table. Libera suggested moving on to business and starting by having everyone note down their personal data. He carefully reviewed the document she had prepared. It listed her as Labura Glico, level 4, with the water attribute, as well as acquired skills in non-elemental life enhancement and support magic. Luca was struck by how fitting water magic seemed for her. She nodded in response and said that her versatility for both attacks and support makes experimenting with her a real pleasure. Then he pushed his sheet forward on the table and announced that this was his magic. Libera leaned closer and sharply said that she had been waiting for this very moment. He urged her not to lower the bar and to keep hope for the best, because she, being confident, would be able to find a lot of applications for it. She snatched the document, but as soon as she fixed her gaze on the lines, her face twisted sharply, her eyes became wide with shock. She faltered, stammering. He remained calm and replied, "This type of elementary magic must be kept secret, and to others she should only say that he uses magic that affects the human body." She was still digesting the revelation she had heard and listened attentively as Lucas leaned forward with a sly smile. He asked her to keep everything secret, assuring her, "Nothing terrible, because Malson already knows everything and hasn't said a word." She agreed without hesitation and immediately gave her word not to tell anyone else about it. After her, Val, the same slime, picked up the word and also loudly promised to keep everything secret. Her thoughts rushed back to the duel now. She understood what kind of magic was behind Dan's instant knockout. Her Luca had used a sleep spell. It was her first time seeing hypnotic magic live. The other side was stuck in his own thoughts, impatiently guessing how exactly his special abilities would finally come into play. He pondered aloud. He was eager for this too. Then her gaze shifted to something else. She voiced her curiosity about his immaterial magic, specifically about the Wallen noted that until the original spell is registered, it is impossible to either dismantle or analyze it. He thought aloud whether this skill of evaluation was merely a reference to the Ministry of Magic's database. She confirmed his suspicion and explained that for a basic magical check, the evaluation function needs to be connected to an extremely advanced analytical mode. With a light, pompous gesture, she pulled out the magic watch and held it forward. She explained, "Condensing complex functions into such a tiny device is technically incredibly difficult, but the small amounts of mana make it feasible." Then she emphasized that it is a rare item, and at those words Luca's eyes flared with desire. He was already imagining how this watch would reveal itself in dungeon raids and information gathering. In class, teacher Glorin Research announces the next extracurricular activity, a mandatory event for all freshmen called Dungeon Practice. Lysian Marshall carefully absorbs every word, while Luca grimaces inwardly and mutters, "What kind of punishment is this?" The teacher begins introducing the teams and each participant individually. He announces, Team 1 will be led by Princess Irina Alidius. Her team includes both the main character of the game and the dark-skinned examinee. Observing this, Libera Glicko quietly notes to herself that Lysian and the main character usually do not part ways. This happens rarely. He continues the announcement and clearly states, Lysian Marshall will lead Team 2. Lysian accepts the appointment confidently. The camera shows her lineup, Luca, Ruby, and another girl. After that, the teacher prepares to announce Team 3. Just as Luca is about to move on, Libera Hliako raises her hand and addresses him. She declares that as a cunning companion she wants to join the same team, but the teacher immediately refuses. They must maintain balance between the teams by level. He tells her not to worry and to focus on doing everything she can with her own team. Libera lowers her gaze and silently makes a decision, noticing her own disappointment. Luke turns to her with a gentle expression and tells her not to get hurt. When they are about to part, Lysian silently watches from a distance. Libera adjusts her glasses and replies to Luke, saying that she believes everything will be fine with him, but he must not behave recklessly. Students move to another room for team meetings. The teacher orders everyone to disperse into their groups and get to work. In her assigned room, Lysian Marshall stands with her hands on her hips and confidently introduces herself. She is the team leader. Next to Luke, another participant is named Muriel. She is a scholarship student, loves studying, but immediately admits she is not strong in battle. Luke silently wonders quietly whether Lysian is really as scary as she looks. After that, he introduces himself, Luke Gugolo Disgustos, and immediately after, a girl with cat ears joyfully introduces herself, Ruby. Since she is a determined adventurer, the team can rely on her in the dungeons. After the introductions, Muriel enthusiastically offers her help to the whole company. She asks if she can be their errand girl and offers to run for anything they might need, whether bread or juice. While the newly formed team sizes each other up, Ruby blossoms with joy. She thanks Lucas and immediately asks to call him Lucasama. Then she makes him an offer. She allows him to pet her on the head, and Lucas agrees without hesitation, although inside he struggles with the urge to touch her cat ears. Her response sharply takes on a double-meaning tone when she winks and says to the three, "Do whatever you want." Luke is left speechless by her brazen frankness until somewhere from an unseen source, a loud voice breaks the air, bursting out in a shout. The voice belongs to an angry listener. She demands to finally be listened to properly. She reproaches them for their behavior, sharply asks what they are doing when they should be discussing team dynamics. Grail's gaze slides to Muriel, and she silently indicates that Muriel is being reprimanded. Luke, caught between the two, is gnawed by the thought how troublesome everything has become now. In a moment, the team sits down, trying to regain control of the conversation. Healing hints prompt them to pause. Ruby supports this idea, and Muriel unexpectedly picks it up. With a smile, she offers her lap as a pillow for anyone who wants to rest. Lishan again freezes in shock at their straightforwardness and brands it as unclean. Even so, she cannot hold back her indignation. Luke and Ruby politely decline the offer and support each other. A lap pillow is too intimate a thing for those who have just met. Snapping from irritation, Lyjan rejects the idea of a break and insists the final checks must be completed. Inside, she grumbles at Ruby, and Lucas desperately realizes he will not see any rest. Lyjan cuts off his attempt to complain. They are at a strategic meeting, so no one has the right to sleep. When the noise finally subsides, the team begins to discuss their roles. Ruby explains she fights with a dagger, can dodge enemy attacks, and also works with tribute magic. Lyjan nods and confirms her placish will stand on the front line as a knight. Following their example, Muriel declares that she will take on the role of the rearguard, confidently demonstrating her abilities and healing magic, bowing. She barely managed to finish explaining her role when exhausted Luke, unable to bear it, declared that he wanted to sleep and she shuddered and gasped in shock. Her surprise instantly turned into a heated argument, as if a competition. Meryl suggested carrying sleepy Luke in her arms, but Ruby immediately intervened and cut in, saying she would do it herself. Lyjan's patience ran out. She sharply poured out complaints at them and declared that Luke only goes into relaxed mode because he is spoiled too much. Despite her sharp outburst, the others calmly agreed to challenge the dungeon over the weekend. Ruby added, "It's fine if Lucas moves only when there is a real need." Lyjan announced with a heavy sigh that the meeting was adjourned for today. After Lyjan let them go, Lucas stayed in place and awkwardly pondered what was what. He was surprised why the two girls were so diligently sticking close to him from the very first meeting. Were they trying to impress him because of his ducal status? He thought further he wouldn't be able to get along with the heroines until he solved each of their own problems. He once again replayed in his mind what was happening. Ruby and Muriel languidly stood close and showered him with goods bearing his face. At first, it seemed even more pleasant than hatred, but suddenly an unexpected thought struck him. Could he have become a kind of idol for someone? Meanwhile, in another corner of the academy, Libera Glicko noticed Luca's group. She called out to him, and turning to her companion Dan, said that the first team seemed to have already done their part, and asked if Luca had managed to get along with the new teammates. She approached him directly, took his hand, and asked how the conversation went. Luke, without looking away, answered briefly, "No problems, we can move on." Having taken Libera, he set off and Dan watched them until they disappeared from sight. A doubt flashed across his face. He wondered if Luke still held hatred for him. His gaze remained fixed on Luca's distant back, after which he was always sure the protagonist would continue to hold a grudge against him. "I hate him." When Luca's left, Dan suddenly clearly realized what he did not expect. The hostility of the main character completely dissolved. He stood alone, and a strange feeling was washing over him as he processed Luke's sudden change in behavior. When the weekend came, Luke and his company entered the thicket and made their way to the Rangu Forest too, heading there too. As they walked, Lucas explained that this very dungeon was hidden in the mountains behind the school. Although it was large, its rank remained quite low, 2 out of a maximum of 10. Students often hunt monsters inside, so their numbers are constantly decreasing. With the spectator's explanation, Ruby revealed that dungeons are huge hubs that people hunt for resources. They enter to dig up magical stones for monsters, which are then used to power magical tools. Therefore, adventurers are sent to thin out monster populations and keep dungeons within manageable limits. Banks, this expedition grew out of a planning meeting where Luke suddenly found himself the center of excessive attention. Meryl and Ruby stood on either side, bombarding him with questions whether he was tired, whether he wanted a drink. Labura stood aside, clarifying if there was anything else he needed. Overwhelmed with care, Luke could only insist that he was. Only then did he realize why Muriel had treated him so kindly. As soon as he found himself in the present, inside the dungeon, he pointed in that direction and ordered, "Fire and arrow there." Muriel responded only. His understanding formed a few days ago after a conversation involving Karen. She approached him and told him what she had learned from Muriel. Karen conveyed, "Muriel sincerely thanks Luke for once curing her younger brother of an illness." While Luke pondered her words, he pieced together the puzzle and understood. It was about a child from the orphanage. In his memories, confused frescoes still loomed nearby exactly when Karen. Having spoken these words, Karen continued and explained. Since they were now on the same team, Muriel wanted to somehow thank him. She even went so far as to ask Karen, Luke's fiancé, for permission. Luke, holding a cup of tea, froze in surprise and asked why Karen was telling him this. The memory fades and blurs, and in the present Muriel confidently declares, "I overcame it." Karen's voice echoes in his head, emphasizing how deeply and sincerely grateful Muriel is, and Muriel herself then felt, thanks to Karen's intervention, she could finally exhale and relax. All that remained of the previous threat was a single creature that looked like an oily animal. Just moments later, Ruby reappears and lifts a bag in her hands. She declares that she has the magical stone, and the monsters are easy to handle because they are not moving. She cheerfully greets someone who is dozing. Luke reveals his plan. A wide-cast spell strike covers the area, and a search with autosleep calms all the monsters around them. But this method is not to everyone's liking. She, with a face like a mask of rage, shouts that they are not fighting at all. He waves his hand and exhales, asking why she is so dissatisfied. The answer comes sharply: she has enough of everything. Luke lays out the plan step by step, and it is clear, he is jealous of Lision. She hardly has to do anything. Meryl will send the sleeping monsters flying with arrows from the bow, and Ruby will collect their magical stones and finish off each strike. Stragglers, by carrying out her part of the plan, she does not calm Quell Lycan's anger. When she chops the helpless, dozing creatures, she bursts out in a cry of powerless irritation and shouts, asking why both her squad and the monster are also sleeping. This is not the kind of combat warm-up she was expecting. Muriel's gaze slides over the suffering of her comrades, and she steps forward with an unwavering expression. She declares aloud that she will make Lision understand for Luke's sake. Tired Luke only exhales heavily and asks Muriel to take on the explanation. She agrees without hesitation. She immediately emphasizes, it is Luke's magic that puts the monsters to sleep. This state not only allows him to gather himself and control the power more precisely, but it is also indispensable. He can continue casting spells even when while she sleeps, she continues her story. This method allows her to train archery and raise her own level. Moreover, thanks to Luke's strategy, even someone like Lision, who is not strong in combat, can safely venture into dangerous. Smiling warmly and confidently, Muriel finishes the explanation and asks Lision if he now understands the kindness behind Luke's actions and what he has done for their benefit. She defends her point sincerely and vigorously. Luke gently strokes Muriel's head, saying she did well. Muriel is overwhelmed by a wave of embarrassed joy. In his thoughts, Luke notes how much her behavior has changed, now completely unlike during their first meeting. The almost warm moment is immediately broken. Ruby notices Luke praising Muriel and quickly jumps closer, indignantly declaring that it is unfair and insistently demanding that he stroke her head. She also sharply lowered her gaze to her own head. Her envy instantly turned into professional annoyance. She waved her hand energetically and declared that the dungeon should be a dangerous place. In her opinion, this increasingly resembled ordinary hard labor rather than a true team event during which they could bond and support each other. Her sharp outburst made Lision look confused. She admitted, although the circumstances were not bad, something felt strange. But Luke behaved differently. He was truly puzzled by their dissatisfaction. He asked what exactly was wrong with their conflict. Luke silently listened as Lision unfolded the reason for her anxiety. She was uneasy that they were clearing the dungeon so confidently and effortlessly. To these words, he calmly presented his own reasoning. Their method allows them to easily handle the monsters they need to hunt, and this benefits both sides: those who want to get rid of the beasts and those who seek to see how far the dungeon's influence extends. His tone immediately changed. His gaze sharpened as he posed a pointed question to Lision. Did she really want to throw her comrades into danger? He clenched his fist and did not finish speaking. In a moment, he was about to start accusing exactly such behavior. Method of fighting: you press on the sore spot and ask if she already understood who among them is speaking unnecessarily. Lision nervously twitches her speech, confused by the force of his tone, and chokes on her words, shouting that she did nothing of the sort. Her own outburst. She sways uncertainly. Noticing her pain, Lucas turned away. His face, without any readable emotion, froze as he made it clear. Everyone is to disperse for today. The sharp refusal threw Lision off track. She froze, not uttering a single word, and stood still. She watched them with her gaze, and a drop of sweat rolled down her temple. In her mind, she concluded, if the leader is not determined, then they really should stop. Her gaze slid to the tamed monsters nearby as a reminder that this, after all, is only a... Realizing this, she turned to the group and loudly threw an apology, asking him to wait. But Luke was already settled on the back of a huge, sleeping creature. Ruby sat nearby, and a prolonged sound stretched out. He replied without even opening his eyes, calmly said that they need to keep going because there is still enough time. Lision could only stare between her earlier outburst and his plastic detachment. A sour, collected tone and a simple statement sounded without unnecessary words. Another moment and Ruby and Lyjan were already in a fighting stance, no trace left of that scuffle, both gazes again aimed toward the town. After exhausting training in the dungeon with tension, Lup takes a pause, comfortably settling back on the large slime creature, while a sea of smoke trembles around. Smaller, but his rest is cut short. The team is getting ready to leave. While Ruby celebrates their return home, Luca reaches out to the magic stones to send them to school. Lyjan shouts his name and tension flickers in her gaze. She officially demands a ranked duel against him. Luke lets out a tired sigh. His patience are apparently already at their limit, so he gloomily asks if she forgot that exactly. He turns back to Dan. Lyjan begins to object and states that the fight will lose meaning under other conditions, but Luca sharply interrupts her. With a cold command, he orders Ruby to become Lyjan's opponent, and the Beast Girl immediately agrees. Volunteer, his eyes narrow into slits from intense concentration. He solemnly proclaims his complete hatred for the unusual, then looks directly at Lyjan and throws her a challenge. Does she really want to fight and bring disaster to the whole team? The risk is at stake. He continues and explains. If her only task is to prove who is right, then a fight with Ruby is no different from a fight with him. And yet he finally formulates his decision directly and without hesitation. He will not. He prepares for battle. Having already clearly shown his position, he turns to Ruby to check if she agrees with this arrangement. Ruby cheerfully, Naya-s in response, confirming her consent. Lyjan silently surrenders and quietly makes a decision. Ruby agrees to the terms. When they meet eyes, she reveals her own logic. She admits there is no real reason to fight, yet for Lyjan it becomes an incredibly painful, forced compromise for a person who finds it hard to be themselves and can only speak the way they know how. During the clash, without any understanding of what is happening, Ruby jumps up and solemnly challenges Lyjan as a replacement for Luke to a ranked match. Lyjan, gathering new determination, accepts. Luke stands aside and watches silently, hoping that this will be enough for her to finally be satisfied. In the inner courtyard of the Ruby Academy, a woman approaches Lyjan Marshall. She inquires why Lyjan, an adventurer who should be meticulous about fights, allows Luca. Lyjan turns to her and asks without unnecessary words what Ruby wants. Ruby explains, the true goal of the traveler is not the fight. Lyjan freezes in disbelief and calls her an idiot for such words. She unfolds the idea. Travelers strive to survive until the end but consciously risk their lives against monsters, and it's even better when no one gets hurt. In the background, other students, including Mural, watch the clash unfold. In Ruby's gaze, determination declares that she enjoys a fight of this kind the most and promises to save some other material for later. After this, she directly challenges Lyjan, who does not back down. She accepts the invitation and proposes to turn their fight into an official ranked confrontation. The fight starts with a burst of movements. Ruby rushes forward at incredible speed, suddenly crouches and taunts Lyjan, urging her not to look down on her, before crashing into the distance in a moment. The attack hits Lichenshield. The knight's apprentice groans hoarsely and instinctively tenses, suddenly taking a too strong blow from the little traveler. Lysian grits her teeth in anger. Even despite the habit of fighting in class, she suddenly realizes she cannot keep up with Ruby's frantic pace. She breaks from the pace, trying to catch up with Ruby's speed, and suddenly realizes she won't have time to raise the shield to block the strike. Ruby a blurred shadow before her ice fires that she is too slow. A joyful smile spreads across Ruby's face as she jumps into the air and calls the wind to strengthen her next strike. A blow strengthened by the wind flies with all its might into the shield of Lycia. Her defense shatters, and she, knocked off her feet, falls to the ground already toppled. Ruby stands over her defeated body. Ruby lay broken while the proctor's voice, infallible and official, declared her the winner. Standing nearby, Ruby turned to Luke and Labura and briefly said, "The fight is over." After that, she spread her arms wide and loudly celebrated the victory. Luke limited himself to a brief, "Good job," while off-screen the proctor added that their ratings would be updated accordingly. He stepped forward and patted Ruby on the head, a friendly gesture that made the cat girl instantly tense and freeze, gripping him with her gaze. Then his gaze fell again on Lyjan. She was crouching in a kneeling pose. She raised her eyes to him and gloomily asked what he wanted. He said he was just thinking of taking her to the infirmary. After a short pause, Lyjan quietly agreed. With her consent, Ruby and Labura set off to help the wounded, listening to her footsteps. Luke said they would part ways there for the day, and Labura nodded, ready to support. Nearby, Merle explained to Dan a cunning and confusing story. She told that before her rebirth, Lyjan was her favorite heroine from the game. One of Lyjan's paths ended with her becoming the perfect wife, but Merle preferred a completely different version where Lyjan loses to Luke and has to marry him. In that version of the game, the protagonist later attacked Luke's base and won over him. She did not back down and continued explaining to Dan, bringing up images on the screen. The protagonist reaches out to Lijun. Merle said this was done so the protagonist could bring Lijun back after Luke's death hand so they could live together again. The story she retold revealed a grim tragedy in this game. Lijun held Luke, who was already dying, in her arms and declared that he had become her only family. The memory broke off at the most painful moment. She listened in shock, standing before Danhai's game double right above Luke's body. While tears rolled down her face, she pointed at him without hesitation and directly accused, "Dan, you killed my husband." He is silent, and in memory Lijun from that other timeline freezes. Her hand lies on the shoulder of his double, and the stern expression on her face does not let go. Licia holds Luca, who is dying, in her arms, while her pain-stricken confession echoes around. She will never become part of the Victor Seven if she has to pay with her own life. Another time, her peer remains a helpless witness and exclaims to the princess in shock, not believing what he heard. The protagonist from that timeline, the one who dealt the final blow, breaks into curses out of anger as Luca's body falls to the ground. He stands amid the fading energy of his attack and has already realized the one who took Litziania's chastity is her doomed chosen one. The burden of this alternative history weighs on Dan. Sweat breaks out on his forehead as Muriel's voice lays out clearly that Lijun was completely and utterly devoted to Lucarite to the bitter end. She finishes her story and her gaze pierces through the memory of Lijun's pure, deep devotion even to the point that she comforted the sobbing Lucaremains branded in her mouth. This, in her words, is how this picture was burned into memory. Her thoughts scatter into yet another possible way out of the game. She imagines how a girl with such a pure soul would give herself to any man, turning into a perfect, useless machine for a man. Then Riley doubts herself. Maybe she is the one making him helpless. After all, he cannot become useless without. While a clash erupts in another part, its echo fades in the academic hall. Lijun sits on the floor, broken, calling Luke by the family name Disgastos. She looks down at him, his face remaining completely neutral, while Dan watches silently from the southern side. Luke turns his gaze to Dan and asks why the princess did not challenge him specifically. Dan replies, he refused, so the princess went to fight not him, but Ruby. Luke nods as if to say Lijun lost but still focuses on one thing. The challenge was not addressed to him. He looks at him and the latter admits his surprise. He had always been on guard for a new clash, but now he sees Luke stands completely calm. Dan understands that this is their first real conversation. To these words, Luke only nodded in response, without unnecessary explanations. Luke silently freezes in amazement. Dan approaches and apologizes, honestly admitting that it was because of him that he caused Luca so many problems. Luke can only emit a quiet purr and cannot believe that such a step actually happened. Expectedly, Dan slightly bows his head and offers a brief, honest apology for his past actions. Luke remains on guard anyway. Inside, he rereads this sudden mood change and involuntarily recalls. The hero from that game he remembers was much more impulsive and hot-headed. Then he cannot let go of the thought what Dan really intended and what his true intentions are. His thoughts leap to listening, but he catches only fragments. Who exactly? Despite the tears, she insists on her decision. She reminds, the Duke is disgusting, and these remains are the princess's enemy, and someday he will have to put an end to him. Luca admits that this Dan is nothing like the one he expected. Dan sharply points at Luca and breaks the silence with approving words. He is supposedly an incredible worker, far ahead of all the others. Then Dan admits that Luca is not at all the disgusting noble person he initially imagined him to be. Embarrassed by his own admission, Dan orders him to be silent. A barely noticeable smile slides across Luca's lips as he immediately replies, implying that apparently even a fool. Then he speaks to Dan much more seriously. He acknowledges him as an enemy but does not call him a bad person. While Dan embraces the frantic leash, Luke promises to take it under his care. To this, Dan responds with a gesture and gives what he has. Holding Lijun, Dan internally processes Luca's words through his thoughts and quickly concludes. He must clearly separate their lines and not mix intentions. After that, he speaks aloud and warns Luca. The princess may resist, but her position might prevent her from heeding his request not to attack. Lijun, though unconscious, seems to sense a shift. A thought suddenly flashes through her mind about how helpless Dane has become vulnerable. When Dan stands next to Lijun, the main character of the game emerges nearby and scrutinizes them with a cold, piercing gaze. He snorts and declares that Dan is a commoner, and also that he understands nothing. He continues to press with a force that literally breaks the space, yet inside he notes to himself, he is impressed by how unbreakable Dan is. The boy withstands that incredible pressure he emits and he acknowledges it. He lowers his gaze to the stunned Dan, a barely noticeable smile on his lips. After that, he advises Dan to remain as he is now and to grow into a wonderful protector. When he turns to leave, he adds a final clarification and asks Dan not to make false conclusions. This very outcome, he says stubbornly, is the best for him. Finally, he turns away and walks off, holding a confident smile on his lips while replaying his own essence in his mind. Inside, he admits, he is the laziest and most inscrutable noble thief. The realization rolls through his thoughts, a barely audible quiet laugh appears on his lips, and Dan is weakened by trembling. He is completely confused. As Wake departs, a thought about incredible intersections flashes through his mind. While the whole class follows his movements, everyone's gaze fixes on Sayla, the teacher's assistant. She announces the start of extra classes. Each team will spend the next 3 days inside the dungeon. Effective AM. The teacher explains the rules in detail to the gathered students, while the instructors remain on alert within the dungeon. She directly warns that calling for help without real need will affect their grades, and after they have mastered the basic skills, they are expected to provide their own food and SH. When the students begin to prepare, Muriel confronts Dan and demandingly asks why he came without any weapons and holds his hands empty. Her voice sounds sharp. She recalls that Lysian promised not to interfere with his methods, but at that moment something responded and reached out to him. She gestures to her own gear of full armor, and a large backpacan states that women must be prepared. For the 3-day expedition, she insists they will need a lot of supplies, then aloud wonders if she has too much of this stuff, if she has overdone something like baggage. Next to Libra, Glyco and Ruby watch the exchange. Libra notices the difference between Muriel, a young noblewoman, and Ruby, an adventurer accustomed to hikes and camping. But despite this, Libra agrees. It seems Muriel really brought. Meryl only briefly smiles and gives Laborie the instruction. Let her explain all the nuances of the dungeon to Ruby. While she says this, Ruby eagerly clings to her backpack, shouts for Meryl to wait, and tries to figure out what is inside. She tries to instruct Dan, who is unprepared for everything, asks him to stay with what he can fit in his bag, and says he won't need a large water flask. Dan, crouching and choking with despair, doesn't understand why he got this trial. Meanwhile, Lysian tries to seize the initiative, sharply orders everyone to listen as soon as he begins to explain how to hold the course to navigate them. Lysian tries to gather everyone into a group, but her attempt is disrupted by Ruby's endless fussing. Because of this, Lysian has to forcibly hold the cat girl. Eventually, Ruby gives up. She admits that she took too many unnecessary things. But Labura catches sight of Dan out of the corner of her eye and immediately notices the opposite problem. Aloud, she wonders if he even brought the F. Not enough, she mentally reviews her own preparations, recalling a convenient all-in-one bag containing clothes, food, and shelter. Noticing Lysian's gloomy expression, Libera involuntarily wonders if something is bothering her. But Lysian cuts off Sharplish is not going to share anything. She falls silent about the food. Then she turns directly to Dan and says that everyone must come to an understanding for the next 3 days. Calmly, without emotion, he cuts in, she should not. Don't worry about him. As soon as the whole company enters the forest, Den immediately settles on a large, soft, plush pillow. Lysian advises them to find a campsite before Dark Ruby and Libera wholeheartedly support this idea. His relaxation is interrupted by the appearance of Muriel with a huge backpack. She says that she ultimately passed the task to Dan and recalls how he told her. She was already carrying him to the infirmary. Somewhere at this moment, she approaches Libery, who is sitting reading, and asks if she is training even now. Muriel explains she's just repaying Dan for past kindness. After that, she adds an unexpected detail, and Ruby, whom Muriel considers stronger than herself, insists that Dan is even stronger. Stronger than Ruby. Hearing this, Dan sharply slams the book shut, bang, like a strike into the silence. He immediately cuts off the conversation on the spot, tells Murulu that's enough, and emphasizes they are already entering the dungeon, and even declares his personal hatred for her. He paces back and forth, then settles back onto his pillow, and casually says that he will rely on others again, as always. After that, he adds that they all sacrificed their weekends to prepare for this task, hinting that he did not do this. Despite his indifference, 3 girls, Ruby, Lysian, and Labura, stick together and are ready. Their focused faces speak for themselves. They unanimously confirm their readiness and declare in one voice that the time has come. Time to start. She sharply turned around, and her gaze was fixed with determination while the cloak settled around her shoulders. Behind her, the members of Class 0 were already lining up, Dan in armor, Ruby in a hooded cloak, and the rest gathered and ready for the trial ahead. The game's protagonist stood with them, holding Dan's large pillow with interest. Their goal was announced: the conquest of the dungeon. Then right below, the gate itself opened. a dark, broken abyss, a shadowy chasm, where only a distant speck of light hinted at the descent into the depths. Ruby, the cat-like beastkin, notices the target in the darkness and solemnly declares that she will go hunting it. Muriel, with eternal yearning in her claws from the sky and full trust in the creature, allows her to lead. After that, she raises her voice to Lyjan and orders her to take control of the upper section, and Lyjan immediately agrees. After the battle, Ruby approaches Muriel with concern and asks if she is okay. Muriel, though breathing heavily, suddenly beams a bright smile and reassures. She even leveled up and will not be a burden to the whole team. After that, she turns to Luke and leads him to the thought that there is a good spot nearby for a camp. Muriel gently warns Ruby not to overdo it, and the beastkin responds with relief and thanks. In a moment, the camp is already set up. Before their eyes stands not an ordinary tent, but a luxuriously decorated structure. Muriel freezes, her gaze glides over the details, and she bursts out, "What is this?" Luke calmly organizes everything. Such a tent is almost a direct invitation for an attack. He points to the shower cabin and says that after a long day outside, he wants to wash up and lie down in a proper bed because body care is necessary. Muriel, still stunned, mumbles to herself that he only bothers and is an inconvenience. She offers to get him some dried meat. Luke cuts in. It's time to sit down for dinner. Then he adds that her sister, supposedly, spent the entire previous year the same way and even improved. At these words, Muriel literally freezes. Her surprise knows no bounds. On the table unfolds a luxurious dish, a plate of bean pasta and soup made from dried meat, vegetables, and mushrooms. Luke says that Karen brought dishes that keep for a long time, and since there is enough food for everyone, they should sit together and eat. He himself freezes, openly expressing surprise. How is it that, while in camp, they managed to get such a luxurious meal? Muriel, after tasting the first piece, noticeably softens and proclaims that the dish is incredible. Lyjan picks up. He insists that it tastes so good that it is even unfair to the body and praises Karen for her skill. That same evening, when the girls are already settling down to sleep in their nightcaps, Meryl announces she will take the first watch because the rest are already going to bed. From her bed, Ruby raises her voice and asks whom exactly she intends to stand guard against. Meanwhile, in the tent, Luca pours himself a drink, and Lishan is taking a shower. Ruby explains that a watch is not needed. Luca, she clarifies, can use his magic even in sleep so no monster will come closer than 30 meters. Understanding overwhelms Murala. She freezes, silently stunned, as she finally puts all the logic together. Magic is even twitching with surprise when Lyjan addresses her with the formal title Princess. She immediately demands an explanation for why the title changed so suddenly. Meanwhile, Lyjan glanced at the large bed. Luke was not asleep there yet. Attention Lishchenya rushes back to Muriel. She demands explanations and wants to know what she desires. Then Lishchen blurts out that she comes from the martial territory, and Muriel is clearly thrown off balance by this. Muriel recovers from the shock, and her face suddenly hardens. She bluntly asks Lyjan if this means that until this very moment he truly despised Luke. Lyjan hesitates after all. Luke is nearby now, and looks as if he is sound asleep. She approaches the bed and immediately notices both Luke and Karen are still awake. Merle explains that Luke usually resorts to his sleep and magic to freeze time and fall asleep instantly, then suggests maybe he deliberately stays awake because he wants to hear their true feelings for him. Tension among the three girls is rising. Ruby extends a proposal to listen, and Muriel supports her, saying that a meaningful conversation can help each of them sort out their own thoughts and feelings. While there is a chance, Lysian begins with apologies for the arrogant and selfish behavior during practical training. Muriel freezes for a moment, struck by the straightforwardness of these words. She bows her head low, showing sincere remorse. Relief immediately flashes across Meryl's face. Seeing this, Ruby smiles and nudges Lysian. Lift your head, she accepts the apology. A smile flashes on Lysian's face. She asks to be called only by her name and says she hopes they can all understand each other as a team and classmates. Karen and Ruby happily echo her words and, trying on the name, gladly call it out. Luke, who was pretending to sleep, lies in bed and silently comes to the thought. Eavesdropping on her private conversation is rude. His tension eases when he sees that they have understood each other again. When dawn breaks on the horizon, he stands right by the 10th morning ritual is already complete. Plans for the next goal surface in his mind, training to enhance his ability to cast several spells simultaneously. He started with training, tossing several valve slugs into the air at once. Then his tracking ability guided them to the target. They tracked any living creature within 30 meters. After this, he activated his control technique. His consciousness slipped into remote mode and could control the body while he slept. Simultaneously, the veil system for protection connected to intercept any threats he might sense. A mental map flashed in his mind. Everything safe was highlighted in blue, and what needed monitoring flickered yellow. But one cell lit up red. An enemy was approaching his tent. A sharp alarm impulse triggered in his head, and at that very moment, the Lysian marshal lunged at him with all his might. He hovered in the air, holding magical spheres in an aerial dance, suddenly realizing this was the perfect moment to exercise control over magic. He decided to use 3 spells at once, but was aware that such a strain would noticeably exhaust his strength. The sword of Lysian cut through the air right where he had just stood. With a cold face, he asked her if she really wanted to be killed and reminded her, if he dealt with her right in the dungeon, no evidence would remain. But Lysian responded to the threat with a confident, slightly cheeky smile as if his skill had truly impressed her. She lowered her weapon and explained. She had been closely watching his actions for some time. She noticed how he simultaneously engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat and cast several spells, calling it an incredible technique. After that, she directly asked him, is this his true power? Power, she continued her thought, admitted that she finally understood how foolish she had been and demanded that he fight her. While she spoke, Luca stirred in the tent, rising from stillness, and the prince noticed that a question had arisen in him, what was really her true goal. Her mind intermittently returned to the conversation with Dan. He advised not to take what you hear at face value, but to examine everything yourself and draw your own conclusion. His words were what then changed her thinking. She added, although their families were rival noble houses, this did not at all mean that Luca automatically had the right to become her personal. Luke lingered on this thought and weighed all the details. He realized, as with Dan, her new attitude was a deviation from the original course of events. He became anxious that too many changes would break his control over the entire situation, but eventually he concluded, if his victory in their first duel was indeed the cause, then he himself must fix the consequences, fixing only this one thing. Several months passed. He stood up and met her gaze directly. I will fight you now. But immediately he made a demand. This is the only time. Promise that you will never challenge me again. Lysian turned around, her face froze in open surprise. Lysian Bim stands straight and calm, with an impassive face, and thanks him for accepting her challenge. After that, she asked what exactly they were betting on in this match. He only responded by producing a small ball of light in his palm and firmly stated, there are no bets here. Then he explained that as soon as the blades cross, a conversation begins between them. Inside, he quietly exhales through his teeth, because he thinks she is a true battle maniac. Not the least bit embarrassed, she points a sword at him and declares that this one fight will be enough for her to fully understand him. She is completely focused, adjusts the stance, and shouts sharply for him to get ready, and he instantly runs through the thought of slime valve in his head in response. He understands, just throw tribute magic and the fight will end in a moment, but he still decides to submit to her will and engage in dialogue, unquestionably. Over a brief pause, she bursts forward, her silhouette merges into a swift, blurred motion. He raises his hand to intercept the strike and meets the attack with a focused, cold concentration on his face. The strike of her hand knocks him off his feet and pushes him, forcing him to slide backward on the ground, but he still does not fall completely. Hold on, she presses her own and relentlessly drives the attack. He parries every blow, strengthening his defense with magic at the moment of contact. When the exchange of blows erupts, she studies his technique, noting every move each time. She admits, his manipulative magic is truly formidable, but for an inexperienced user, the actions are too simple, easy to predict. A cold, watchful gaze quickly finds a gap in his defense. He tightens his jaw, his gaze for a moment becomes slightly tense, and in his thoughts he decides, it's time to bring the duel to an end. But Lysian is already noticeably out of breath, and sweat is rolling off him because of. No matter how much her fatigue weighs her down, she growls through her teeth. This is not the end yet. She barely manages to gather herself for a new burst and suddenly exhales sharply from shock. But for a moment, everything changes. He has already closed the distance between them, his hand hanging in the air just a few centimeters in front of her face. Only a broken breath escaped her from shock when Luke, without striking, leaned closer and pressed his lips too. He touched her cheek with the edge of his hand. Stepping back, he lightly tapped her on the forehead. I won, he said evenly, then got up and walked away. Lysian froze on the ground, completely stunned, unable to move for a moment. Motionless, she raised her palm to her mouth, and her cheeks flushed as a hot wave washed over her. Somewhere in the distance, Lucas solemnly and calmly simply ordered her to go and fetch. Shower. A few minutes later, already in academic uniform, he sat alone at the table and calmly said, breakfast. Moving on to the matter, she was already ready. The next morning, under a clear sky, Carol tried to wake Luca. He grumbled that she should eat without him, planning to sleep a little longer. Later, Muriel approached him and, almost impatiently, reported the forest was behaving strangely. She assured that she could not find a single monster in it. Luke looked back at her and asked if she knew anything specific. She replied that she did, and that all this was too serious given the circumstances. Turning on the search capabilities, he immediately saw only his own marker in the field. The realization hit him in the head. For now, Meryl was explaining to Ruby and Lysiana the strange phenomenon. When the dungeon is too thoroughly cleaned, it releases a boss to remove intruders and absorbs weaker monsters to increase its strength. At that moment, Lysiana suddenly shouted in alarm confirmation that the fight with the giant had already begun. Monster, somewhere else, a dark-skinned student just woke up and suddenly realized what she had seen earlier. A kiss slipped from her lips. Luke, irritated, immediately brushed it off and decided it was a coincidence, then told her not to worry. Lishan was still lost in thought, trying to understand if it was really a kiss. Ruby abruptly interrupted her, reminding, first barefoot. Lishan pulled herself together, regained control, and then ordered Ruby to go and watch over a specific. When she confirms to Muriel that their camp is under control, Luke catches her attention, asks where the boss is, and immediately points the direction where they need to go. Suddenly he grabs her by the hand, jerking sharply and thus shocking her, then urges her to hurry, saying their goal is very close now. Myra just watches this. Surprised, without waiting for an answer, he sharply pulls her into a run and leads the whole company as they rush through the forest. Aimed at the threat, he abruptly stops and orders her to look. Lysian is still catching her breath from being pulled so sharply along, and Luke remains. In the clearing before them, a colossal slimy monster shudders with its entire gelatinous body, looming over. Landscape. Luca grimaces with disgust, his face instantly spoiling. He quietly thinks, the real is truly disgusting, not at all the same as the cute forest creatures he is used to imagining. He already imagined it, and suddenly a powerful jet of water crashes into the giant slime. Nearby, Libru Glyco is visible behind the spell. She is holding a wand, and her gemstone is glowing in. From the flash of the attack, it becomes clear. Team 1 is already engaged in battle. Luke immediately understands the course of events, repeats what happened in the original story. When Dan draws his sword to join the fight, Luke launches the call of Val, and in his palm, he moves himself higher, settled on a thick branch, and the valve hovers nearby. From below, from the ground, Ruby notices him and sharply demands an explanation of where he is headed. Calmly replies that he is simply heading